it, doesn't it?
Hello, everybody. We are back with Eclectic Soundtrax, episode number 61, with Mike Norris, host of My Classic Album. My Classic Podcast? Jesus Christ, tell me what's it called, Mike?
My Classic Album.
I've been on the damn thing.
Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah, My Classic Album. You were right the first time.
There we go. Yeah, I thought it was I'm trying to... My camera seemed weird to myself. Mike, I'm sure I'm bigger than that. We like to always start unprofessionally. I want to make sure we stay with that. There we go. That looks a little better. Anyway, so Mike, what part of England are you in?
So I live in a little city called Durham, which is not far. It's like the northeast of England.
Oh, yes, dude! Holy shit! I don't think we ever talked about it. One of my best friends, Guy Laverick, who we've had on the podcast, fantastic musician and guitar player. Dude, you should get this dude on your show. He is, I want to say he's in Durham, because you're like near Sunderland, right?
Yeah, not far from there at all, yeah.
Dude, yes. That's amazing. I've been to that area several times. It's been years since I've been over there, but I love it. I've been up there, Sunderland, Durham, Newcastle. I think that's the little town we used to hit all the bars in was Durham.
Yeah.
I could be totally wrong.
I mean, you can get around it all in one night. It's a big student.
Yeah.
It's a big student city now. So, like, it's, you can, whereas with Newcastle, I think you've got to pick and choose.
Yeah, sure. Bigger city, right. But, I've been to Newcastle once or twice, but Durham was like, I think the regular, we'd go bar hopping on. I mean, we were younger back then, and, we'd like to, like most rock metal musicians, we'd go to the bars with a bunch of girls that wanted nothing to do with guys like us and stand there and be like, she's hot. All right, let's have another pint. Yeah.
That sounds about right.
So, next bar.
That's really cool, man. Wow, very cool. And I love your podcast. It is such a cool idea. And I don't remember how we initially got in touch. Do you remember how we got in touch?
I imagine. I think there's one of two ways that I look for guests. I was just saying to Vic before you came on that sometimes I just think, I'm just going to send this person an email because the worst thing they can say is no. Others, it's I think the Facebook algorithm has a lot to answer for. So sometimes I'll just be scrolling on, and because they know that I'm always chatting with bands and singers and stuff, all these bands and singers that it thinks I like.
They probably just saw my band name as a good Rogering and was like, oh, well, this is English.
Yeah, I think that's
where I picked this up when I was over in, Sunderland, Durham, years and years ago. That's where this whole band name came from, for better or for worse. And yet to know if it was cool, if it's funny and cool, or the worst decision I've ever made in my life. I don't know. But anyway, that's what my band's called. Anyway, but yeah, it was so cool because one way or another we ended up connecting. And the album, now you are... have you started up a second quote unquote season? I want to say you did 50 episodes. Is that right?
So we've done 56 episodes now over 3 seasons.
Okay, and you did. So this is like bragging rights here, right? So I was like guest number 24 or something, somewhere in the middle of. And you did, maybe it was your first 2 seasons then, that you did a, what do you call it, like a battle of the battle of the podcast, battle of the bands, battle of the albums, because all your guests basically essentially pick one of their favorite albums or their favorite album, blah blah blah. Yeah. And then what was so impressive about your podcast, I had such a blast because you really do your research. You're obviously really know what you're talking about, and you're a huge music fan, and you go track by track through these albums. You know everything about it, and it was just fascinating. I picked Appetite for Destruction's Guns N' Roses because that album was hugely pivotal to me. It's probably, I could cite it as the reason I started playing guitar, and it was like shifted me kind of right when I was coming to be a teen to like, oh my gosh, I want to play guitar. I love rock. It like got me into rock and metal, and so it was just, that's why I picked that album. And when we talked about it, I learned things from you, and it was just such a cool way we did it. And so this is what you do with all your guests. And then you had a big battle of all the different albums that had been picked over the first 50 episodes. Was that correct? The first 50 episodes?
Yeah, I think it just seemed like a good time to do it. And like I say, I think yours was about halfway through. So I think it was like second season. Appetite is actually one of my favorite albums too. So when you'd said we were doing this, I was very excited. And so obviously, what we did essentially was there was like a 50 bracket, and I think it was our Instagram followers basically each day there was a different poll with 2 different albums, and we just ran it down until shortly before the final episode, the 50th episode aired, and Appetite was the one that won.
That's right. I picked the greatest album ever, people.
I'm trying to think,
according to Mike's podcast.
I think it was Rumours. I think it was between Rumours by Fleetwood Mac and Heavy Destruction, and I was like, that is...
Oh, dude, yeah. I mean, Rumours, fuck. I didn't have a lot of... my parents growing up, they had a little case of cassette tapes. My dad had a bunch of records, but you kind of like... I guess it wasn't listened to a lot of that. We had heard some of it. And then when I started getting into rock and stuff and playing guitar, I discovered all that. He had all these Hendrix and Beatles and Sabbath. I'm like, dude, what the hell? Why weren't you playing these things? But I remember a handful of albums: Beatles, Sgt. Pepper, Doors' Greatest Hits, Elton John Greatest Hits, and one of those was Fleetwood Mac. Rumours was one of the early albums I was introduced to that we'd always listen to on family road trips or whatever. So yeah, I mean, undeniably a brilliant album. What were some of the other ones? Metallica Black Album was in there, right? Was there?
Yeah, Black Album did pretty well. Night at the Opera by Queen, I think that came third. I've got most of them next to me actually. Born to Run, Bruce Springsteen, Revolver by the Beatles.
Oh yeah,
just amazing albums, and some that surprised me that I thought, well, that'll go far, and then it would go out in the first round. And so we were talking just before about Holy Diver by Dio, and I love that album. Blaze Bayley chose it. Absolutely amazing album. It went up against Bow to Hell in the first round, and I thought, well, Bow to Hell will knock that out. It didn't. And it just kept going and going and going. I think, it's just one of those...
Holy Diver kept going, or Bow to Hell kept going?
Holy Diver.
Holy Diver,
yeah,
okay.
Holy Diver. And I think, it's such a phenomenal album. So it was nice to see these ones that maybe, I thought maybe wouldn't get a lot of love, to get that love and to get that appreciation. So I think, it got people listening to those albums again or checking them out or going back to old episodes.
So cool.
Just chatting about music. I was getting loads of messages from the listeners being like, I genuinely can't vote today. Don't make me do it.
Right. Oh, dude, I know, right? You get to that point where dude, these are all so great. How do you pick? Now, so and you said Night of Opera was number 3. I've been doing a little bit of Queen reading. Shamefully, I don't know Queen's catalog like I should. I'm one of those, I know the greatest hits and a few out, but I haven't listened to all of Queen like I really should have. And what's one great thing about your podcast, like you're saying about listeners going back and listening, it makes you start to kind of get interested and you dive into something. And so I started doing that because I said, well, why don't you pick an album when you come on our podcast? Yeah. This is the premise of your show. And let's talk about one of your favorite albums. And picking a favorite album is almost impossible, right? I mean, but you picked Sheer Heart Attack by Queen, right? Which is the album before Night of the Opera. I believe it came out in 1974. Now, was Night of the Opera 74 as well, or was that 75?
So Night of the Opera was 75, but it was at that point where I think they actually did release 2 albums in 74. So Queen 2 and Sheer Heart Attack followed each other very quickly. I think the reason I went with that, because to be fair, we've talked about some of my favourite albums already, Bow to Hell, Rumours, Appetite. I think the reason I went for Sheer Heart Attack is Queen are just, when you're talking about those memories of going through your parents' albums and stuff, for me, it was the Queen albums. And I remember hearing those albums and getting into Queen, and I'm an absolute... If anyone listens to all 56 episodes of those podcasts, they'll hear me drop in Queen wherever I can. For me, they're almost kind of the beginning of all, and they're not, maybe not historically the beginning of it all, but for me, in terms of my love of music, they're the centre, and then it all comes out from there.
I mean, honestly, Queen is one of those bands, you can pick a handful of bands. I mean, clearly the Beatles would be one, and I think Queen is kind of right there on the heels of that. And just in terms of a band that just did everything you possibly could, was always moving forward, trying new things, reinventing the wheel, innovations in the studio, you know what I mean? Great performers, great songwriters, and I think it was actually my friend Guy over there who lives right down the street from you that might have said one time, we were talking about the ultimate, I don't think it was frontman. I'm trying to think of maybe, but I think it could have been him. I could be wrong, that cited Freddie Mercury because he's the full deal, performer, songwriter, just vocalist, singer, I mean, you could he would, no matter who you are, he would have to be in the top 10 greatest vocalists and frontmen of all time. Period.
He's got to be in the conversation simply because
Right.
Like the band, he also evolved. So obviously when we're talking about like Sheer Heart Attack and stuff, the reason that's my favourite Queen album, and the reason I picked that is that my argument to anyone who's maybe just listened to the greatest hits and want to dive in a little bit more, they're genuinely the band that I could say they had to go at everything. They tried everything, you know, so early on, like Queen 2, in very ways is quite progressive metal in some ways when you listen to that album, you know, and Night at the Opera is very kind of chaotic in terms of jumping genre and stuff. In the 70s, they were this amazing rock band. In the 80s, they become this amazing pop band. And I think Sheer Heart Attack is just this point where literally the album seems to flow really nicely, which is bizarre because every single song is completely different. There's like all sorts of, you know, there's more like traditional rock stuff. There's like vaudeville at one point. There's, you know, more poppy chart friendly stuff. Like they can do and try anything on that album.
Yeah, and that's, to me, like, that's where I kind of align it with the Beatles, too, right? Because the Beatles, you cited Revolver, which was, some people would cite as, like, that turning point for the Beatles, right? And there's a progression. You hear it happening in Rubber Soul and Revolver and then Sgt. Pepper, and they're all amazing albums. How can you pick, right? But, I mean, I love all those that I just said, but also Abbey Road. My God, what a fantastic! I think Abbey Road, if I hadn't picked Appetite Destruction, like that might have been my next one, or maybe maybe a Pink Floyd album. Like basically anything Pink Floyd did in the 70s is amazing in my opinion. But yeah, this is kind of like that. And what's cool about this album too is it's all over the place, but yet, like you said, there's also a continuity. They start off with a track. Track 1 is like this long, interesting track. What is it? Brighton Rock? What is it called?
Brighton Rock.
And it's, I think, I know you know all this stuff. I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know here, but yeah, so you got like, the first track, which I think is a Brian May tune with this like iconic guitar solo, and Brian May, who's this freaking rocket scientist genius who's designed his own guitars and amps and gear and messed around with delay pedals to come up with, you know, he was innovating stuff for these albums, for their recordings. I think he did for this track, right, with his kind of an iconic guitar solo moment he has there. And it's just, kind of an interesting track. And then Killer Queen is track 2, which is one of their probably top 10 most known, you know. And I wouldn't say vaudeville, but it's got that quirky, honky-tonk kind of jangly piano. It's got it's kind of got the fun. That's a very pop, kind of a poppy Mercury moment.
That's my wife's favorite Queen song, funnily enough. And I think
so good. Yeah.
For me, it's the word to use it. So I always think Queen is the perfect, particularly in those early albums, it's the perfect name for them. And that song has a very kind of regal feel to it. I always think that Brian's guitar has that very kind of regal feel anyway when he uses it in certain ways. But I think Killer Queen
does
almost a culmination of, like I say, those early albums are almost metal in some ways. There's certainly kind of metal elements to it, and coming out kind of harder rock side of things. And then this is kind of when I think Seven Seas Arrive, the last album, did pretty well in the charts, and this is when they start to think, right, so this is how we can take that sound, but then make it so people can, you know, more accessible, I guess, because I think that I love it, but I know some people struggle a little bit with that first Queen album, that they think it's maybe a little too
progressive.
Yeah. I mean, I love it.
But just funny to think that early on, 70, I mean, I guess they're around from 70 or whatever, but 73 when that came out, right? I mean, that's still pretty early. I mean, Sabbath was out. When was Rush's first album? Rush was out, right?
I'm almost certain Rush were out by that point.
So, I mean, you had metal and progressive things happening, but Queen's pretty early on in the game for that stuff, like you said, with the more rockin' tones, the more sort of metal guitar, progressive elements and stuff like that in those first couple of records.
I think it just works because it's, you know, and I think you could say this for a few bands, but Queen is certainly one of them where I think that all 4 of them are integral to that sound, and that's why from 71 when they formed right up to 91 when Freddie passed away, and that's why I think that material's so untouchable, because I think it's just like they all bring something to it. So obviously it's Brian and Roger for me who really bring that kind of that rock vibe to it, the heavier sound, particularly Roger Taylor, who I could come on and talk I could come on and talk about Roger Taylor for hours. Like, I worship the man. But
now on this album, so actually that's a good segue, because I'm kind of doing your thing, right? I'm kind of going track by track. If we talk about Roger Taylor, Now, was it him or John Deacon that was their first writing credit on this album? Because Roger Taylor wrote Tenement Funster, right?
Yeah, so I think Misfire, that's later on in the album, that's John's first credit. And again, something that I love about those early Queen albums is, you know, we've talked about how amazing Freddie Mercury was as a frontman, but he wasn't afraid to take that step back to be like, well, here's a Roger song, here's a Brian song. So Tenement Funster, just a quick segue there, about a month ago now, Roger Taylor did a big solo tour. He's just released a solo album. It's been his first for about 5 years. And he played Newcastle. And I thought, by hook, by crook, I'm going. I don't care if I can't find anyone to go with. I'm just going. I'm going. So I love all of his solo stuff. I love the Roger tracks on Queen albums. And he came on, and the second track he did was Tenement Funster, and I lost my shit.
Oh, wow.
Absolutely. Nice. To hear those songs, you know, things like I'm in Love with My Car, Tenement Funster, I Love Fight from the Inside on News of the World. You know, I think in another lifetime, I think Roger would have been an amazing frontman for a hugely successful band. It just so happened the band he was in had Freddie Mercury in it.
I'm in Love with My Car. Was that on the next album?
It was, yeah.
Okay, yeah. I didn't realize he wrote that one. So, yeah, and you know what's funny too is Freddie Mercury has a distinct voice, and you know when you're listening to Freddie Mercury, and it's just amazing and flawless. But what's funny is, like, when you're casually listening, it's kind of like the Beatles. All those guys can sing. I mean, Ringo kind of stands out. I mean, they all have their unique voice, but if I'm not really listening, I'm not thinking about it. Sometimes you're like, oh, that was George Harrison, not John Lennon or whatever.
Yeah.
And even, like, listening to this, like, there were moments where I'm like, holy cow, that's not Freddie Mercury. It's like, so who else? Do they all sing? Who sings aside from Freddie Mercury on this album?
So Roger sings Tenement Funster, and then Brian sings actually one of my favourite tracks, which is later on, which is She Makes Me, which is in brackets Stormtroopers in stiletto. So that's towards the end of the album, which is a very kind of atmospheric track.
And that's but Mercury wrote that one, right?
I think it was Brian. I'd have to double check though.
Oh, it is Brian May. Sorry. Yep, I'm looking at it. Wow. Okay. Cool. Yeah. So what I love about this too, and I cited Abbey Road, and that's one thing I love about Abbey Road, and maybe the Who had done it, but I don't know when the Who was doing their concept albums. And I know there's like, I guess some concept album stuff started happening in the late 60s and early 70s, obviously Pink Floyd and that kind of stuff. But I love the way that the 3 tracks, Tenement Funster, Flick of the Wrist, and Lily of the Valley, flow together in that sort of side B of Abbey Road way.
Yeah.
I love when that happens. You don't hear that enough, you know what I mean?
Totally
Especially
agree.
Nowadays in the digital world. But I think I'm an old album. I'm sure, obviously, you are. You know, an old album guy, and I love when you have those moments of songs that kind of flow. And Queen really did that well, which is interesting though, because like you have the famous "We Will Rock You," "We Are the Champions," right? But they weren't even track listed that way, right? And weren't they like flipped on on a single or something?
I think on the single they were. If you buy News of the World, it's "We Will Rock You" and then "We Are the Champions," and that opens.
So they
the
actually
album.
did it that way on a single. Okay.
I don't know about I honestly, to be fair, with the single, it was a double A. I'm not sure which one got played more. Because to be fair, I mean, they just go hand in hand at this point, don't they? You know?
Yeah, exactly. That's how you've always heard it. It's funny when you're used to hearing something like that, and then you see it, and you're like, "Wait a minute, those aren't track listed that way? That's so bizarre," you know?
Yeah, I mean, even like when you see them live, I mean, obviously, I'm 35, so when Freddie played his last show at Nebworth, I was 2 months old. So obviously, I never got to see Freddie live. But obviously, I've seen Roger just recently, and I've seen them. They toured with Paul Rodgers for a few years from Bad Company. So I saw them a few times. That was really good. And
forgot about that. Yeah.
And then obviously Adam Lambert's been touring with them for a while now, and I think I saw them about 5 years ago. So I've had that chance to see them perform all of these songs. Obviously, John Deacon's no longer in the band either, sadly, but it's still great to kind of to get there and hear all those songs and see them play it, and it's great.
Yeah. Adam Lambert, what a gig! I mean, but the dude really does kind of. Now, didn't he get going on some kind of?
It's like American Idol.
Is it American Idol?
Yeah,
is that what it was?
Yeah,
okay.
It was American Idol, and I think, funnily enough, I'm sure his audition song was Bohemian Rhapsody. So I think right from the start, and then to be fair, I think they show it over here, but on some like random channel late at night. Obviously, we've got our own like British equivalents of those shows, but I'm sure like in the final. Brian and Roger came on and he performed with them, and he also performed with one of my other favourite bands, which is Kiss. So, like, to think that he got to perform with Kiss and Queen in one night, I think that showed kind of what kind of chops he's got as a vocalist, really. But I think within the Queen fan base, that's something that's very, very contentious. Let's just say.
Now that's an interesting, and there's nothing wrong with liking different styles of music and different, but what's so interesting, right? And I've noticed this with I would assume any of these iconic guitar players that I might mention would also be huge Queen fans, of course, but almost everyone is just like this massive Kiss fan, which Kiss is like the fun rock and roll band. They're not reinventing the wheel. Now I don't know Kiss's catalog, but I'm pretty sure they never did anything even remotely near what Queen did from an innovative standpoint. I mean, but it's funny. Like, everybody loves Kiss, and I think it's not everybody, but they're this fun rock and roll Now, the one thing they do have in common is the theatrics, right? The theatrics and the rock show, and I think that's why all these great, whether you're talking about Eddie Van Halen or Dimebag or whoever the case may be, that were these big Kiss fans. Sometimes these guys are these virtuoso, amazing guitarists, and you're going like, really? Like fucking, what's his name? Ace Frehley? Like, Ace Frehley was like, I'm amazing. And I'm like, bro, you're playing a pentatonic scale. Like, relax. Like, you're not Brian May, okay?
It's an interesting one because I think, so obviously you've got Hendrix, and then there's Eddie Van Halen, and there's all this debate about kind of who was in the middle, who was the bridge at that point. Do you know what I mean? Because I've had people say it was David Gilmour. For me, if you think about America, if you think about these guitarists you're talking about who will cite Ace as an influence, regardless of his chops or anything, right? He's got to be in that conversation. He's obviously inspired guitarists who would go on to exceed his skills. You know what I mean? Like Eddie Van Halen.
All of them.
You know what I mean? Absolutely.
But I think you're right. I think it's because Kiss was this, when you're a kid especially, it's this fun, rock and roll, and it's everything that you're not supposed to like, and it's fire and blood and tongue, and women.
The guys from Anthrax are big Kiss fans, too.
Everyone's a Kiss fan, dude. And I've always kind of been like, a little, I don't mean to shit on Kiss. Vic and I have shit on Kiss, to be fair, but like more in a fun kind of like way. But it's funny because but I think that's why, because and I think like Marty Friedman, who's one of my favorite guitarists, was like, he's this massive Ace Frehley Kiss fan. He also loves the Ramones was one of his big first influences, and he plays a lot of pop music. He plays a lot of Japanese pop, and he's really influenced by 50s pop. And so I think it's like, it gets you into music and excites you as a kid, particularly, probably, right? Especially as a teenager or something. Yeah. Makes you want to play, and that always sticks with you. You get into all these other guys that are these virtuosos and all that, but that little and there's something to be said for simple, like, keep it simple, stupid, right? Speaking of which, you being a big Kiss fan, like, I remember being a kid with the absurdly ridiculous Tipper Gore, who's there should be statues of Tipper Gore these days in this country, where like cancel everybody for saying something I don't like. Yeah. Like Kid Tipper Gore, who was like, well, everything that says the bad word must be banned or whatever, like that kind of stuff. But like, so what does KISS mean? Because keep it simple, stupid makes sense. But I remember like Pat Roberts in the 700 Club. I don't know if that means anything to you over there, but like, Knights in Satan's service. Like, really? These motherfuckers? I mean, it's ridiculous, dude. And everything in the 80s was fucking satanic. You know what I mean? It's so fucking stupid. So what does it stand for? Do you know?
As far as I know, it's literally like the word KISS. Because I thought for a long time that it did stand for something. And I think I'd heard the Knights in Satan's service thing as well, which I thought was just hilarious.
Ridiculous. Yeah.
But especially when you think like they're one of those bands that are a bit like Ghost. I don't know if you've listened to much Ghost.
Exactly. Yeah. Like Ghost is the most non-scary Ghost is great. Like they're good pop music. Now here's the thing. We want to be satanic. Behemoth is like those guys. I was talking to Tim from Runescar the other day, and we were talking. Behemoth did a you know what I'm talking about? The black metal band.
Yeah.
They're from somewhere in Norway or Finland or something, which is appropriate. I mean, like if these guys, like you watch their videos and their stage show, and you're like, okay, these dudes actually probably worship Satan. Like it's hardcore. Like they wear that brand and they mean it and they do it right. It's awesome. Whether you're just from an artistic standpoint, it's like they're owning what they do in that brand. Ghost, on the other hand, is kind of like campy. It's fun. I like it, but it's funny when you see like Slayer fans like Ghost. You're like,
it's like
and Kiss is the same way. It's like what is fucking Hell's Candyland? Like it's not scary. It's not satanic. It's just fun rock and roll.
My daughter's 4 years old, and she asked me to play Ghost songs in the car. Which, to be fair, I did get. My wife was my wife was a bit.
Dude, that's my favorite. Year Zero is the best. I can't get enough of that.
But it's so melodic. Because it's Sweden, isn't it?
It's so melodic. It's really good. Yeah. Like they basically took ways of saying the word Satan and made it like where you even like Christians are like Lucifer. Yeah, it's just like it's so catchy. But I think that's a good parallel. Like it's a very theatrical show. It's more pop-based music. It's about the show, you know, and then all that stuff is just a gimmick. But I don't know Kiss's catalog. But the funny thing about them getting this satanic moniker from some jack off in the 80s or whatever, like it's like, what did they ever do that was satanic? Lick it up. Like, no, I don't know any Kiss songs that are satanic. Love Gun. Like, there's guys like sitting around racking their brains like, how do we make this satanic? Like, because Gene Simmons sticks his tongue out? I mean, Gene Simmons looks kind of like a wildebeest. I don't know.
It's literally the only parallel I can make is potentially Gene being the demon. Because again, if you listen to their music, there's nothing... Right. Nothing remotely occult or satanic or anything in there at all. And once we get into the 80s and they unmask, and it is stuff like Lick It Up and Crazy Nights.
Oh, and I mean, yeah, and all this ridiculous stuff. And then the Disco 7. One thing I remember Kiss did when it was real big in the early 90s, Kiss did, it was kind of my first introduction to Kiss because as a kid, I didn't know anything and everything was satanic. And then I heard Guns N' Roses. When I heard Appetite, I remember being like, is this, like my friend's brother brought it over on a cassette tape. And I was like, is this that heavy metal? Oh my God, Ozzy Osbourne biting heads off animals and he's Satan and everything's Satan. And then I heard it, so I was like, damn, that's badass. And I remember like hearing about Kiss over the years, never really heard them. And I actually saw their MTV Unplugged, which was really good. Yeah. It was actually really good.
I think it was just before the original lineup reformed. So like it was, I think Bruce Kulick was in there at the time. And then
Peter Criss on drums on that one.
No,
and
then,
Eric Carr, Eric Carr, and then Peter. No, it's Eric Singer. Eric Carr had passed away by that point.
Okay, that's right. That's right.
But then it was. Then obviously Ace and Peter came on during the performance, and that's when everyone got super excited that this reunion was happening and it was gonna go.
Well, anyway, back to Queen.
I like a good meander. I do. I love that. Yeah.
We're really good at meandering on this podcast. So Flick of the Wrist. I really like that track particularly. Lily of the Valley is kind of a short, almost like a reprise or something. Now I'm Here. Was that a Mercury song?
It was. I'll tell you what's cool about Lily of the Valley, which is, again, this is more if you're doing a deep dive, that there's loads of Queen songs, particularly on those first 3 albums, and they're all Freddie compositions, and they're all, when he was little, he used to like play with his sister, and they would play in this kind of like in their imagination, this like magical world called Rye, so which is where 7 Seas of Rye comes from. So loads of the songs make allusions to this world, so that I'd have to have a look through them. I don't remember which ones there are, but Lily of the Valley is definitely one of them, because there's a messenger from 7 Seas has flown to tell the King of Rye he's lost his throne. So the songs all kind of link in together really nicely. So it's really a really short song. I think. Right. I remember Brian saying something along the lines that he thought it was a song about Freddie coming to terms with his sexuality. I imagine he'd be in a position to know that more than us, but I always thought that was a really interesting thing.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah, I wonder, I mean, as far as the band, I mean, because I don't know. I mean, none of us were born back then, but even in the 80s, I didn't really know, wasn't even listening to any of this stuff until the 90s at best. But, like, when Freddie Mercury, I caught just the very tail and kind of was knowing what was going on when he passed away and that horrible, AIDS epidemic of the day. But I kind of lost my train of thought there. I wonder, like, do you know if the band, like, in terms of once back then, it was much more, keep it under wraps kind of thing. And I don't know if the main Queen itself was sort of putting that on the forefront, or that have anything to do with it, or was he always hiding his sexuality? Do you know anything about that?
I think it's an interesting one, because I think if you think about, because again, certainly in those early albums, there's definitely like a glam element. So you've got like, obviously, Bowie, T-Rex that were quite androgynous. It's similar kind of image that Freddie had at the time. I think it was just a case of, I don't know if it was necessarily like a secret, but it was never really something that he spoke about. I think he was, as you get towards the 70s and the 80s, he was very like well known in like the gay scene in Munich and New York and stuff. But I don't think like he never publicly came out, or, there was never some big interview or anything like that where he spoke about his sexuality. I think it was just something, again, I think the movie, Bohemian Rhapsody, if anyone's seen it, I think that
I haven't actually.
Tries to address that in some ways about him kind of coming to terms with his sexuality and stuff. And I'd be interested was that for dramatic effect, or is that from insight from Brian and Roger? They were like, well, look, actually, this is kind of how it happened at the time.
Yeah. Yeah, those movies are tricky because you got to make things entertaining. Yeah. It's like The Doors. The Doors is a great movie, but how accurate is it? We all know, Morrison was a character, to put it lightly, but things are definitely, hammed up for dramatic effect in films. So sometimes I feel like you have to take things with a grain of salt if you're going that route. There's
definitely a part in the film. And, it's one of those things where I think to myself, I'm saying this, but I wasn't there. So I guess we'll never know for sure. But I've never read anything. So there's a big bit in the film where Freddie goes off to do a solo album. The band split up, like they all hate each other. As far as I know, that never happened. That's just, he did go off and make a solo album. But Roger had done it first. He went off and did Fun in Space. So, I don't think that there was much hostility about that. Again, it's like you say, I think sometimes the movies, like if you've seen Elton John's Rocketman movie, which is...
I haven't seen that either. And
fantastic.
I feel like there's this weird part of me that doesn't want to... I mean, I should watch the movies, but I almost feel like, because I know, it's not all accurate, because it's for dramatic effect, and that's
Rocketman
hesitant, but I should watch him.
Yeah, Rocketman gets around that in a really nice way, because I think when he was promoting it, Elton said it was more like kind of almost his interpretation, what happened to his imagination. So there's really weird bits where he's playing the piano and he's floating in the air, and so it's played a little bit as if it's almost like his recollection of it rather than what actually happened. So you can kind of forgive when it meanders off a little bit, whereas the Queen one's more of like a straightforward, this is what happened, but maybe these bits didn't happen.
Right. The Elton John one's basically saying, hey, we're romanticizing this from a sort of a first-person perspective.
Exactly.
So you don't get bored, right?
Great film.
Have you seen either one of those?
No, I haven't seen either one of those. The Bohemian Rhapsody movie, I guess because I heard that song so much after Wayne's World, it's like, I'm not ready to see it yet. Because that's what came to mind.
That song's not old though, dude. That song, every time you hear it, it's like, it's just freaking amazing.
Oh yeah.
And what's so much more amazing about, that's why nowadays, I don't have anything against, there's all kinds of great pop music. There's so much good music out there in all kinds of genres. And I know things change and evolve, and I'm not, sometimes it takes hearing something from more of a personal perspective or someone or doing a little deep dive or background, then you start to gain appreciation, because on the surface it's very easy to be like, oh, this mumble rap piece of shit, and this and I have a harder time with some genres than others. But to be fair, there is good stuff in every genre, right? And new things come and exist. I'm like, once upon a time, people heard heavy metal and were like, oh, the devil, this is the worst. And now it's commonplace rock and roll, right? Now it's classic rock. So, I think it's important to keep that perspective. But one thing that cannot be denied is back in the days of, these albums, it's and all these bands, whether it be the Beatles or Floyd or Zeppelin or Queen or whatever, there were no cheating, cut and paste, digital this and that, auto-tune this and that. I mean, these guys went in and they played it for real. And they had to be unbelievably innovative with the analog world and how to, I was reading something about 70 vocal tracks on this, or 100 vocal tracks, and they're dealing with the state of the art at the time Studer, 24-track machine that they had just gotten. And you've got to, bounce this back this way and that way, and then all these innovative things. And I was reading about Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon, or no, it was, it might have been for the intro of Money. They had tape wrapped all around the room doing all this. I don't even remember crazy. And nowadays it's so easy. You know what I mean? It's just let me go grab this sample and I'll chop and put this here. I remember reading that years ago when I started playing about the future of music is, moving things around. I'm like, that's ridiculous, with this linear perspective. And it's the truth. That's how it is nowadays. And I think the downside to that is any jack off can just be like, I'm a musician, and, cut and paste crap and throw something up. And it's like, nah, bro, you're not.
I think a lot of,
but it's also nice because you do have an affordable way to express yourself artistically. So that's the upside, that everybody, does have an option, whereas you don't have to go into a gajillion-dollar studio under a major label budget, etc.
I always think about his Def Leppard's Hysteria album, where literally Mutt had them recording it note by note and then just sort of pasting it all together. And I love that album. It's amazing. But then you put it side by side with Appetite that came out that same year.
It's a very different style. Yeah. Appetite's kind of I love the way Guns N' Roses kept that they just had such a nice blend of like, I mean, glam is a push, but we can say that, right? And but then the gutter punk and the rock and roll, the classic rock. I mean, and they did the way the Appetite was treated and recorded is exactly how it should have been, right? If that was polished and the way that Def Leppard was, it would have just not worked.
Yeah, exactly.
It had to be that way, right? A rough around the edges rock and roll band. But Def Leppard, took that, and I guess, and maybe the band, whoever, made those conscious decisions to polish that in a different way. It was very innovative of the time, and you got to give it credit. It's very unique sounding. Speaking of Def Leppard, I was going to bring this up too. Like you actually had some famous guests on your show. You had someone from Def Leppard on your show, right?
Funnily enough, I was thinking because it was Phil Collin, the guitarist.
Wow, man, that's awesome.
That was pure luck, basically. As I'm sure you probably know, you email someone's PR manager and you end up on a mailing list, and then all these emails are coming every other day promoting stuff. And sometimes, just think, we'll send an email and see what happens. Not expecting to hear anything. And Def Leppard were releasing like a vinyl box set of like their albums. I think it was from Euphoria up to Songs from the Sparkle Lounge or something like that. So I just emailed, just being like, look, I do this podcast, would any of the guys like to come on? And they replied and they're like, oh, yeah, Phil would like to do it. He's chose Aladdin Sane by David Bowie. And the weird coincidence was that the research for these episodes can take, obviously depending on the album, it can take a long time. And a year earlier, a guy had picked Aladdin Sane, had done all the research, and for whatever reason, it just didn't work out. Like, there was nothing, just one of those things, But I always had this saved on my computer, and every now and again, I'd pop on the social media pages like, if anyone wants to, if anyone really likes Aladdin Sane, perhaps they could come on the podcast. And a couple of people had been quite interested.
No reason.
But then he picked it, so I thought, well, this is perfect, because
that's amazing.
I don't need to do the research, it's done. He's coming on. And he was such a nice guy. Like, he came on and they'd said, because originally they'd said he's got half an hour, and I was like, any chance of an hour? Because anyone who listens knows it's quite a long podcast because we go through the whole album. And they were like, yep, Phil says he can do an hour. I was like, right, great, that's okay.
That's amazing.
And he came on, and I said to him, I know you've only got an hour, I'll be as quick as I can. And he was like, that's all right. He's just like, I've got time. And we ended up, like, the reason I was thinking about it as we were talking is because he was telling me a couple of cool things, a couple of cool stories from the Hysteria sessions, and like getting drunk with Tommy Lee in Paris and not being able to get back to record solos and all of this kind of stuff, and like proper rock star stories,
That's amazing.
But he was just, I think what I love about it is even someone like him who's, a diamond selling recording artist, when you'd start talking about someone's favourite album, you break through all of that. Do you know what I mean? So I was talking to Phil Collin, the music fan, not Phil Collin, the guitarist from Def Leppard. That's how I felt anyway.
Yeah, that's fantastic, man. I love that too. And like, just from, the spectrum of people Vic and I have interviewed, like, most of them are musicians, some of them are artists in different capacities. And, we've had a few different people, but most are musicians. But that's it. We all share that bond. And when you start talking about someone's favorite band, or even more precisely someone's favorite album, I mean, that person comes out, and it's just, there's that excitement, man, I
think one of my favorite episodes, and it's an album that, it was one of the more obscure albums that we've done as well. It's actually one of my favorite albums now after listening to it. Jen Majura from Evanescence came on, and she chose Steve Vai, Sex and Religion. And
no way.
She was like, It's a bit of a weird one, but have a listen, she said.
It is.
And I listened to it, and I just, for whatever, like, I just loved it straight away. Absolutely loved it. And she was just so, I think she was back in Germany at the time because it was during the lockdown, so she wasn't back in America with the band. So she had all the time that we needed, and we just talked about this album. But she knows Devin Townsend, who sings on the album. So at one point she was instant messaging him pictures of quackers while we were chatting. She was talking about interactions she'd had with Steve Vai, all this kind of stuff. And it's such a fun episode to listen to. And I love that album now. I absolutely love it.
That album's interesting, man. I remember when I was getting into all the Guitar Hero stuff, still guys that are some of my favorites, Satriani and Vai and those kind of guys. Like Vai's, iconic, now I'm thinking Sex and Religion, Passion and Warfare, right? And stuff like that. And I had gotten like Fire Garden and Ultrazone was out around. And they all have a similar thing. And there's all these quirky things that Vai has going on, of course, right? But then when I put that one on, I was like, what in the hell is going on? There's a vocalist, and it was so different. And I mean, Devin Townsend is this insanely prolific guy who is just, I mean, that guy, and he's also like a super nice guy. Like, and from every account I've had, and I met him really briefly in like a NAMM signing, but I need to go back and revisit that album because I gave it I don't even think I listened to it, to be honest. I was just kind of like, this isn't what I wanted from Steve Vai, you know? And I don't think I ever gave it a fair shot.
I think at the time it was meant to be, so he was trying to form a supergroup. Of which, I mean, Devin was new to the music business at the time. So, although now I think, in terms of like, you know, going through Steve Vai's discography, it counts as a Steve Vai album. I think at the time it was an attempt to launch a band, which again, I mean, the story, that's fascinating how that didn't work out, but it's,
well, who else was a part of that, you know?
I'm trying to think. So it was Terry Bozzio who played with Frank Zappa. He was on drums.
Oh, good Lord. Okay. Yeah.
Was it T.M. Stevens was on bass. So it was, and Jen had either met or knew these people very well. So then you had this other kind of aspect of it that, you know, she loves this album, but then she's been able to meet the people who recorded this album and in some instances become really good friends with them as well.
Right.
You know, so for her, it was a really special album for her. But I think I just put it on and I'd never heard the album before. And just thought because it's a crazy album. It's crazy in every sense of the word.
Yeah, I feel like I wish it was something else, even if it was a one-off, right? That wasn't Steve Vai, because it's so when you go in thinking Steve Vai and that pops up, you're like, what is happening?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That's what's so odd about it. But like you said, if you can get beyond that initial jolt and then just give the album a fair shot, which I really need to do.
Yeah, I think it's a really rewarding album, and I think that was one of the episodes. I think a lot of people really liked that one. And then you had the Dodies on not long ago, didn't you? Was that right?
Yeah, dude. Yeah. So Bumblefoot referred me, and I've talked to Ron a few times over the years. Super nice guy. And you had him on your show, and he did a Rush album, right?
He did, yes. Going for the One.
Oh, yes. That's right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that, I mean, again, I've lived on Bumblefoot for years, but that was through Jen. So basically, she'd said, I've really enjoyed myself. Okay. Had an amazing time. Who would you like on your show? And I was like, well, what do you mean? And she was like, well, take your pick. I know these people, and sent me a list. So quite a few.
That's amazing, dude.
So quite a few of the people. So,
holy
Travis
cow.
Larson picked a Rush album. He's really good friends with Jen.
Yeah, we had Travis Larson on. Yeah, they're huge. Him and Jennifer, they're huge Rush fans.
Yeah.
Super cool guy. Love Travis.
I think that's our longest episode. I think once me and him got talking about Rush, that was it. Like, I think we were for about 3 hours.
We had a really long episode. Our episode with him was so long, I think Jen was like, I got to go to the bathroom. When is this thing going to end? Like, it just kept going. Yeah.
Oh, it was so good. And then obviously, and then Ron chose Going for the One, which again is just a brilliant album. You know what I mean? Like, and I think that's it. Even sometimes I've not heard the album or I've not heard it for a long time. So then to be able to, because I guess you do listen to it with other ears. So there's been the odd album someone's picked where I've thought, oh, really? Because you're not going to like everything. But when you listen to it it's like you said, there's good in everything. So you kind of listen and you get that appreciation. So for example, I'm not a massive Radiohead fan. That's one of the early episodes we did. We did OK Computer. I've got an appreciation.
I love that album.
I've got an appreciation for it. It's not one that I'd put on, like, you know, but, you know, I think if you'd asked me that before the podcast started, I might have been a bit more dismissive, which is wrong, you know, because again, it's about, and that's what I love. It's helped me discover amazing music as well, or be able to look at music in another way. And it's been absolute thrill the last 5 years.
It is cool. And we, not to your extent at all, but it's, after many podcasts that we've had, one thing that's so cool is Vic and I will be like, maybe, you know, the next day or something, we're like, oh man, dude, we're like listening to music that we otherwise might not have listened to, or maybe you've listened to one album, or maybe you've heard the hit or a song, and then you have someone you talk to and you go back and you listen to some stuff, or maybe you talk about some different music and you listen to that. And this is a good example of that. I mean, I went and actually was like, okay, let me really listen to this album and not just sort of casually put it on, but let me like listen and, you know, and really kind of think about it and dissect it and read a little bit, and like not doing nearly the extensive kind of research that you did. But it definitely gives you a different perspective and appreciation than if you're just sort of like, you put something on in the background and you're like, oh, I recognize that song. And yeah, that's pretty cool. Whatever, you know, especially the older you get, I think it's a different generation nowadays too, in terms of its, you know, the digital singles kind of world again, and it's not the album. But I think that now there's this big resurgence of vinyl, and there is a huge appreciation for that, and a big demographic of people that still listen to records that way, both young and old.
Yeah.
But yeah, that idea of like putting on an album and putting everything else out and just listening to the album and experiencing the album that's extremely different than the casual listening of music, you know?
And there's definitely a place for both. So for me, like, I stream music in my car, I might stream music while I'm tidying the house or whatever. But at the same time, getting a good pair of headphones, putting that record on, side A, sitting back, you know, for me, there's nothing better. So there's definitely elements of both, because I know some people that are just like, oh, well, you know, you should never stream music, you should always listen to vinyl. It's like, well, yeah, but you're not going to have a record player in your car, are you?
These are the same people that are like, I refuse to have an iPhone or whatever. It's like, you know, like, okay, Dad, who now can't get off of his phone. Yeah. So, I mean, that's, you know, you have to evolve with the times. And I think it's great. I mean, it's awesome that we can just be like, hell, what was that? And boom, Google, done, you know, and like Spotify or whatever. So that's really cool. But I also think like it's also really cool. And I love and appreciate that, yeah, there are people that will do that and have that listening experience. And really, one thing that I did one time years ago was with one of my friends out in California, Los Angeles. She was renting from this guy who was an older gentleman who had lost his wife, and he was a Disney animator way back in the day, in like the 50s and 60s, right? A super cool dude, you know, and we're like hanging out at his place, smoke a joint or something, and like put on Abbey Road on vinyl, and it was just like freaking cool, man. You know what I mean? Like, I was just like, this is just a different experience. I've listened to Abbey Road a lot of times, but never quite like that, you know, and so it's a neat thing to do. Back to Queen. Where were we?
I think we're about to.
Now I'm here.
Yeah, now I'm here.
Tell us about that track.
Now I'm here again. It's another Freddie one. I think what's interesting about that is, so that was a single here in the UK, but I think it maybe gets forgotten about amongst things like Killer Queen and Bohemian Rhapsody and stuff. I think that's, from what I've heard, essentially about life on the road. And I think what I love about that one, so Queen's greatest hits, so that's kind of the first half of their career. That's the best-selling album of all time here in the UK. Like, number one. And it's on that album. It's track 11, but I think it's one. I think if you did like a straw poll of people, I think it's, considering it was a single, I think it's one that people sometimes forget about. And it's awesome because it's really hard rock, and it's one, again, I can see why it's released as a single.
Yeah.
I can see, you know, it definitely fits in with that, and there's references to Mott the Hoople and all of that kind of stuff. So I think it's a really cool song.
And that was who they opened for on the Queen 2 tour, right?
Yeah.
Now, and that was in the UK, but was that the first time they went to the US then? Was that, 73?
Yeah. So obviously, I think in the UK, they toured with Mott, and then the tour went to America. That's obviously, so that'll have been sort of back end of 73, maybe even more 74, to be honest. But I think that's where, obviously, while recording this album that we're talking about,
Brian May got sick.
Yeah. So he got hepatitis.
Hepatitis. Right. That was interesting. Like, he was actually in the hospital for, I guess, a good portion of while they were writing and recording the early parts of this album. It was done in several different studios, I think over 4 different studios. And now, so I don't know how much that affected that, but there is some of it that he's not on, like, Deacon plays guitar on, what was the one we were just talking about? Track 3, right? Tenement Funster, right? That's not even Brian May on the acoustic guitar, I don't think.
On the acoustic. No, there's definitely a solo in there. That it might even have been Roger. I know Roger likes to play a lot of, because he's, even on his solo albums, Roger plays everything. So he's a very kind of multi-instrumentalist. So it could have been either of them, to be honest. I know.
That's what you find about these guys, right? They can all just play everything, basically.
I think what's crazy is, like, if you think about Brian May and like we said, this guy made his guitar out of his fireplace when he was a kid. He's one of the greatest guitarists of all time. He's got a PhD in literally rocket science. He was actually scared they were going to kick him out of the band. He was like, while he was ill, he was thinking, shit, like, is this the end of it for me? But obviously they had no intention of doing that. And I do think, you know, obviously, like, there's parts of this album that are very hits, like Brighton Rock and She Makes Me and stuff. But I think maybe that stepping away, I do think maybe you do hear a bit more of Roger and John on this album than you would have done. Tracks like Tenement Funster and Misfire and things like this. Not to say they wouldn't be on there, but I think you do kind of hear a bit more of them maybe on this album than others.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely an expansiveness, like you said, that happens. And they've still got the hard rock. They've still got some slam and heavy riffs. Obviously, like the most famous being Stone Cold Crazy.
Yeah.
But yeah, there's man, the variety is just amazing on this.
I mean, Stone Cold Crazy, which is really interesting. Obviously, Metallica covered that, and I've actually seen Metallica perform that at Nebworth, which was amazing. And I think what's interesting, so we actually did Shea Heart Attack on the podcast way back, and it was a guy called Greg Hart, who is a guitarist in a band called Cats in Space. So if you're into that kind of like 70s rock sound, Cats in Space are awesome.
I like the name.
And he said, because there's always this huge argument that if you're talking thrash metal, that the start of that is Stone Cold Crazy, that's the first kind of evidence of any kind of thrash sound. And he was very dismissive of that. He was like, no way, like, I wouldn't even associate Queen with thrash, no. But for me, because I do like thrash metal, you know what I mean? Like, for me, when you listen to the albums and stuff, for me, it almost does feel like kind of almost like the prototype for what would become thrash. And I'm not saying that all of those bands listened to Stone Cold Crazy and thought, we'll replicate this, but there's certainly something in there that I think the reason
it's pretty heavy, and the tones are pretty heavy. I don't know if it's a tempo thing that would be labeled thrash metal as opposed to like Sabbath, which was more, I don't know, doom metal's not the right term at all, but heavy metal, I guess. I don't know what would distinguish what or what. I mean, I think thrash. We all think like the '80s Big Four, right? Yeah. The surgence, which came from the influence from the sort of the British invasion, right? I mean, so you probably had that stuff coming from the late '70s, I guess.
Yeah. Well, you kind of
I don't know. I saw that, and I think it was some writer that wrote that, wasn't it? Didn't someone stamp that term?
Yeah.
I feel like I saw that. Maybe
it's just an interesting one because I can see where people are coming from, but like you say, obviously, you know. Certainly for Lars and Metallica, it was more about Diamond Head and Motorhead and, you know, all that kind of new wave of British heavy metal stuff. But again, I would argue, I mean, not too obvious, but probably not Motorhead, but for some of the others, if you dig in a bit deeper, you know, I do think there's some Queen influence in there in most bands. So, you know, if you look for it, I do think it is there.
And also, I would think, like, man, when did Priest start? When did Maiden start?
So the Maiden was kind of like late 70s. I think the first album maybe came out sort of 1980.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah. They are later. Priest's been around a long time, though, right? But Priest early stuff was not that heavy.
No, I think that was more of an evolution, yeah. I think they'd been around a bit longer, and then I think that they kind of got sort of roped into that new wave of British heavy metal kind of thing. I think it was, to be fair, that they're a band that I'd love to cover at some point, because they're, as much as I like them, they're a band that I haven't listened to loads or really dug into. So, you know, I'd like to think in the future we'd do some Judas Priest.
Man, I'm going to put you in touch with my buddy Guy. He might throw a Priest album.
Oh, nice.
He'll do something metal.
That and a bad movie.
Oh, yeah. Don't get him talking about movies, though. It'll be all shit. He's the king of bad movies. He's introduced us he's introduced me personally to the worst films of all time. But his musical taste is,
I love a good bad movie, though.
Oh, man, you guys are going to have a great time.
Like, I know it's
You're going to start off talking about a Jason Becker album. It's just going to derail to Samurai Cop 2 bullshit.
For me, and I think it's the same with music as well. Like, if something is, like, bad, but it's interesting, I can deal with that. Yeah. If it's something that's just boring, that's kind of unforgivable. So I think that with films, I think that with music. If something's boring, I switch off. Something can be bad, and I can still listen to it. Not to say that I don't think it's great, but it'll still hold my attention, because I'll be like, what on earth is this?
Well, that's the thing. It's like, I love a good bad movie. Yeah. I mean, there's so many great bad Steven Seagal movies and disaster movies, and I mean, but then some movies are just like, this is just inducing nausea, just horrible. Like, what are some of your favorite movies? Both, what would you consider like great movies that you like that are actually good,
like genuinely
and
good
then movies, and genuinely good movies, but then also movies that are like utter shit that you enjoy also.
So I always said that my favorite movie was Reservoir Dogs, because I love Tarantino. So
that's
Reservoir Dogs.
Yeah.
But then I also I love comedy, so I love things like Airplane, Anchorman, any like daft comedy, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
More recently, so I do enjoy the Marvel movies, and I genuinely love the first Guardians of the Galaxy film, regardless of if it was part of a franchise or not. Like, I just think it's a great movie as it is. I think in terms of like cheesy ones, I'm trying to think. I like a good cheesy Christmas film. I think, you can forgive it a bit more at Christmas. So if you've got a really cheesy Christmas film where like everyone's Christmas dreams come true and stuff. That's some great watching. Going back to Kiss meets the Phantom of the Park. Now, anyone seen this one?
Yes.
No, I have not.
So this was their attempt when they were at their height. They did like a TV movie, and it's essentially like a live action Scooby-Doo, for lack of a better way of putting it.
Right.
That's exactly
and for years I wanted to see it because I'd heard how bad it was. And then they released a box set, and it was on the box set, and I was like, right. I settled down and watched it. Oh, but it's like, I think Gene just roars through the movie. Like, I don't think he ever speaks. I think he just roars like he's some kind of lion. Like Paul Stanley's got like, he has like lasers shoot out of his eyes. Like, oh, it's amazing. I would recommend it to anyone because it's just...
That does sound good.
The first 20 minutes before they come in are really dull. So like the first 20 minutes is like the setting up backstory and it's Doe's dishwater. But then once Kiss come in, that's it. Like, it's amazing after that.
What's this one called again?
Kiss meets the Phantom of the Park.
Okay.
They also, which was interesting because I think this is what their intention was. So I got, as a joke present a few years ago, this is how my daughter got into Kiss. I got a DVD and it genuinely was an animated Scooby-Doo meets Kiss. And
I've seen that. Yeah.
And very funny, put it to one side. And one day she came over and she was like, oh, what's this? And we put it on. And obviously all their songs are on. It's actually, like, for a kid's film, it's pretty good. And she's now obsessed with Kiss. Like, I interviewed Damon Johnston, who's performed with, like, Brother Kane and Alice Cooper and this. And I was running late, and I was sending a message to be like, I'm so sorry, I'm trying to get my daughter to bed, because she was going through a phase where she wouldn't go to sleep unless I sang Beth by Kiss. So, luckily, he was very understanding. But yeah, she's, like, obsessed with Kiss. Like, she really is, which is great.
You got to give it to those guys. No one's ever been better at marketing. I mean, I'm sure they were like, okay, we'll get the kids with this, right? Even the satanic stuff probably served them well because everybody heard about it. It was this big thing. And I mean, there is no piece of merchandise that Kiss has not put their brand on that you can think. It doesn't matter if it's a cell phone cover, a coffin, you know.
That's right.
There's nothing.
Lunchboxes. Theme parks.
Everything, man. What's your favorite Kiss album, by the way?
Good question. Creatures of the Night.
What year is that?
It's, I think, I want to say 80, 81. It's like...
Okay.
So basically that's... Ace has left, although he's still on the cover. And Peter Criss has left, and that's when Eric Carr comes in. But it's just... It's a much... I think they've been through, like... You know, they've tried the disco stuff. They released The Elder, which is, like... a soundtrack to a film that never was, and like they've gone in all these crazy directions, and then it's just them saying, right, it's probably their heaviest album. You know, it's got, if you've heard I Love It Loud and War Machine and stuff, that's the album that they're from. And it's just a great album, and it's the last one before they thought, right, we need to take the makeup off now and try something new. So yeah, I would say Creatures of the Night.
What about you, Vic? What's your favorite Kiss album?
Oh, man.
All of them?
Oh, yeah. I celebrate the entire catalog. Yeah.
What are some of your other favorite bands, Mike?
So, as anyone who can listen to the podcast will tell, like, a lot of it's more around kind of the hard rock sort of metal persuasion. You saw, like, I love, like, AC/DC, Iron Maiden, Motorhead. In terms of more kind of recent bands, I don't know. And this is so strange because they're massive over here, but they're American, and I don't know. I've yet to speak to an American who knows who they are. Have you heard of a band called Blackstone Cherry?
Yeah, dude.
Yeah.
I just listened to them the other day, and it's really good, man.
Like,
it's really good.
For me, they're probably the best band on the planet right now. I think they're absolutely phenomenal, and they've been coming up like in the UK. Like they headline.
They
arenas.
just toured here. Honestly, I'm pretty sure
they had.
I was not able to see them, but I think they just came through here. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I think they when I first saw them, they were supporting Def Leppard and Whitesnake. So I'd gone to that show and came away thinking, who are these guys? They're amazing. They're just a 4-piece from Kentucky. So there's a heavy sound, but a very kind of southern lint to it. I think they're on their 7th album now. They're absolutely phenomenal. Like I'm definitely trying to get one of those guys on the show at some point because I've spoke to a couple of people who kind of know them or like have toured with them and stuff. So I'm hoping to get one of them back on the podcast in the near future. But it's, if you know, like the Kentucky Headhunters. So I think So John Freddie Young is the drummer of Blackstone Cherry. I think it's his uncle who's the drummer of the Headhunters.
Oh, okay.
So there's this kind of real family link to it, but they're phenomenal. Obviously, I really like Ghost. We were talking about Ghost earlier. I also quite like, obviously, it's, you got to be careful in terms of kind of drifting down this particular path too much. But I do quite like sort of acoustic singer-songwritery stuff, but when it gets too schmaltzy and chart-friendly, that's kind of when I tune out. But there's a really cool Scottish singer-songwriter called Amy Mcdonald, who I really like as well, who she tours quite a lot. But I think for me, I think that's it. I think, and I'm not just saying it to be fair, like, one of the other reasons I love so much people coming on the show is because then I discover not just new music from the albums they've picked, but from like the bands and singers I'm talking to. So, you know, like we recently had Emily Johansson, who is the drummer in a Swedish band called Thundermother. Absolutely awesome. Thoroughly recommend checking them out. So I think that's a nice mix because you get the Phil Collins and the Blaze Baileys and stuff, but then these are the guys who are kind of new and trying to stamp their own claim and like the music, because I'm not just saying this, I would never put, if I was thinking about emailing someone, if I listened to the music and I thought, yeah, it's a bit shit, I'm not going to email them, quite frankly. Like, and that might be, you know, but I'm just not, because for me, especially because now we play the music on the show as well, I want to be like,
oh, okay,
listen, because I don't think we did that when you were on, but we've started doing that now.
I don't think so. Yeah,
but like,
cool.
So I can be like, so, you know, I've been talking to so-and-so about this album, have a listen to their track. You know what I mean? So, I think that people want, I'd like to think that there's kind of a quality of that the music I'm recommending, that people are like, yeah, this is really good. And there's usually, so if someone's picked an Iron Maiden album, you can hear that influence, I think, in the music. Or if someone's picked a U2 album, you can hear that influence in the music. So then it's not as if I'm going to be doing like a Joni Mitchell album and then playing like a thrash metal song. You know what I mean?
And here's Behemoth's favorite album from Joni Mitchell.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's fun too because you find out just talking with different people about different bands. We had so we're technically season 2. You would be our 4th guest on season 2. Cool. But our first one was Rob Hammersmith from drummer for Skid Row, nice. Right? And one of the, speaking of daughters, he brought up a band called, God, help me
Sabaton.
out here, Nick. I'm drawing Sabaton.
Okay.
And I forget. You know Sabaton, right? And his daughter's like super into Sabaton, and he started listening to him, and it's like, and I told my parents about it because my dad's like a retired like history professor, and they were like, "Oh my gosh, this is so cool!" And now they were like, "You should make lyric videos," and it's just, and it's interesting, and it's a different thing. And I mean, they're this huge band, like I don't know where they're from, Germany or something, but yeah, it's just cool. And like I would have never. I mean, maybe I would have come across them at some point, but I'm like, oh, okay, cool. This is a new thing I'm checking out. So it's interesting just I'm sure you get this all the time, right? And it's just like someone will bring something up. Oh, I wonder what that is. Like, how did you find out about Blackstone Cherry? How did that, if it's not big in the UK, right? Or is it?
So I think that was I think that's your first exposure to them. So I always say it was when I'd seen Def Leppard and Whitesnake, which was when I'd seen them live. I'm sure like their track was on a video game I was playing. I think it was like a WWE video game or something. And the song was playing in the menu. And I remember thinking, that's a cool song. And then just kind of cracking on with things. And then that night that the night I went to see Def Leppard, they opened the show. But I think for me, it's just crazy. Because I mean, to be fair, they have a very loyal fan base. Like, Blackstone Cherry fans, similar to Queen fans, funnily enough, are very, very loyal. But like, if I flew to America and went to see Blackstone Cherry, I would probably be able to get right to the front. There might be like a few hundred people. In the UK, they're playing to like arenas of like 10, 12,000. So
sounds like par for the course here in the US, man. Yeah. Because now again, I really need to
we had somebody that was
Google
talking
this before
about that.
I just get it.
Yeah.
Hang on a sec. So I'm almost positive, but I just want to make sure I'm thinking of the right band. Then I don't know where to look, but I should just say it and then be wrong if I'm wrong. Fuck it. But I think like I want to say they just tore it through, dude, and played like Antone's, man, here in Austin, and Sam's Burger Joint in San Antonio. We're talking 500 people venues capacity. They're not big places. I mean, they're cool places. Yeah. They're renowned venues.
Arguably, the gigs are better in those places anyway. Like, I would sooner, like, the best Blackstone Cherry gigs I saw were where they played an intimate place that only fits 400 people. You know, they're still amazing in an arena or headlining.
But that's amazing, though, that they've got that they've got a huge fan base over there. I mean, I feel like, you know, at once upon a time, like, everyone wanted to come to America, right? As someone as, like, a American rock band guy, I'm like, oh, we're all like, dude, how the hell do we get over to Europe where people actually give a shit? You know, it's weird, like, because it is. I feel like here, unless you're already at that high level, like, you know, it's sort of like, well, it's think it just rock doesn't seem like a very mainstream thing over here these days, you know?
I don't really know if it is here. I just think it's, for some reason, like live music is certainly alive and well. And like the album charts are more reflective. Do you know what I mean? So like, talk about Roger Taylor, which we were. His album got to number 3 in the album charts. Like the singles just dropped without a trace. Do you know what I mean? Like the singles charts. I don't even listen to the singles chart anymore because it's not a good barometer for like what people are listening to. I don't think. I think it's more the album chart, you know. And I think, that's it. And I think what blows my mind a little bit, talking to some of the guests that I've had on more recently, is that I'll be listening to their music and thinking, this is amazing. Like, you know, is this coming out in the UK? What's going on? Da da da. And then they'll say to me something like, all right, well, I've got to go now because I've got another job because I'm cutting grass or I work in a shop and I think to myself, and to be fair, I spent 15 years in retail, so I'm not bashing any kind of stuff like that. But I think to myself, when you've got such a level of talent, how unfair is it that you're not able to, you know, make more money from that and not have to do that? Do you know what I mean? Like, I think it's crazy.
Yeah. There's a lot of bands like that for sure, man. And, almost everyone I know that's a musician is like teaching, you know, and working or a hired gun, or you're a session guy, or a lot of people get into production and all those different facets. And then of course have various day jobs because, I think, and even guys that I think are at a little higher tier, I mean, so much money goes into the machine, right? It's like if you are, whatever you're making back is usually, you're probably not making a lot of money unless you're pretty high up on the food chain, you know.
But I guess to be fair, like, and you'll know this better than me, I guess that's not what it's about, though. At the end of the day, it's doing it because you love it rather than anything else.
Well, it better be. Yeah. All right, are you crazy? I don't know, but I mean, that's the thing, though. Is like I've experienced this, and it's. Sometimes I think we all, and it's funny, like how many friends I have, and we all, you know, a lot of us, you go through those same moments and struggles, and then you're kind of questioning, and why do I do this to myself, and why am I doing? But then the feeling of when you get on stage and you perform and people appreciate it, or sometimes honestly, man, like one comment or one person sometimes like makes all the difference in the world to me. Like I don't think people really understand. I think this goes for all of us in a human connection, is like how valuable we all are to each other. You might not even realize your value, and one little thing you said passively one day meant the world to someone else, you know? So like that, I feel that happens quite a bit, and it validates and makes you feel, you know, when you feel like you're kind of failing from a numbers standpoint or from a monetary standpoint, you're like, wow, well, this person just said that this album was the soundtrack of their life, or that this changed their life. And you're like, man, that's really cool. I'm glad I suffered through that and put that out there, you know, because it meant something to somebody. And I think I think to your point, I do think like from an artistic standpoint, validation and in a lot of ways is the most important thing. I mean, of course you want to be able to make a living, and making lots of money is awesome, but yeah, if it wasn't for that, I mean, it's like, I don't want to say I wouldn't want to do it at all, but it certainly helps kind of fuel the fire, man. You know, it's like, okay, cool. I feel like there's a purpose to doing this.
I mean, it's probably a clumsy comparison, but I know, so as I said, I worked in retail from the age of 16 right up into my 30s, and I hated every minute of it. Like, I really did. Like, I don't know what it's like over there, but people were just, you know, management just were not the nicest. You just weren't treated very well. I struggled quite severely with my mental health for a long time. And when I'd gone to uni, I'd gone to study like radio production. I was wanting to, you know, present on radio, produce radio, all this kind of stuff. And then I think now, you know, looking back, so obviously I'm out of retail now. I work in mental health, which I love.
Oh, that's great.
I love very, very much. So rewarding. And then obviously, like, I don't make a penny from my classic album. Do you know what I mean? Like, I don't. Like, you know, I just get to have amazing conversations with people about music. And again, it's those comments when someone's saying to you, just daft stuff like this guy was like, oh, I listen to you every day when I go for my run. Like, I love your podcast. You know what I mean? Just something like that, to think I'm a part of someone's day. Do you know what I mean? That they think,
that's great.
Put my classic album on and go for a run. You know, just something like that. Or people saying like, you know, oh, when's your next one coming out? Like, I know people have messaged me because I'd taken a bit of a break till the new year because I'm moving house and a few other things. And people are saying like, oh, so who you having on? What the next album? I don't even know yet. Do you know what I mean? But it's nice that people are excited and that people, you know, that people enjoy it. But at the same time, there's a wealth of stuff to go back and listen to in the meantime as well. So it's all good.
Right. Nah, it's cool, man. I just think it's it's just such a cool idea, man. I'm so glad that however the hell we connected, we did. And I had such a blast talking with you about Appetite, and your premise is so amazing, and it's obviously people are enjoying it. It's really cool. I love the battle of the bands, for lack of a better word, battle of the albums, right? And then like you're getting these fantastic guests, and you're getting people that are high level, people in the really credible, legitimate musicians that are going, yeah, cool, I'll do this. This is awesome, and it's kind of spreading around. And I think that all comes from the place of the passion that you put into it and what you do, because you love it, and you do the research, and it's not like you're just like, you didn't start this podcast to make money, right?
Exactly.
I mean, maybe it will. That would be amazing, right? Just like Vic and I would be like, wouldn't this be great? Like, I think we've made like $10.
Yeah.
but it's like, but that's the whole thing. It's like with anything, right? And that's, I always say this, like when someone's creating, from my point of view as an artist, it's like, as long as someone's creating something from that place of like, their person, their soul, like it's art. They're not creating it because they're trying to be like, oh, how can I make a bunch of money? Now I get when you get to a higher level, right? And it's like, it's not that easy, right? But I still think Queen being a great example. Maybe they went more commercial, but so what? It was all still amazing, and they were the great enough musicians. They could do any genre, any style, and the Beatles or any of those bands. I'm glad they did. It didn't stay stagnant. It didn't stay stale. They kept evolving, but not everything is going to be good, but they could do good in all these different genres, whether it was a pop commercial hit or a metal progressive thing, it doesn't matter. So there's nothing wrong with that. I just don't like when it's like something is like, whether it's a podcast or music or anything, it's just this everything's like contrived from the get-go, right? Nah, man, like art is supposed to be about personal expression. So I think for me, is like if something comes from that place, then I'm like, cool. Like it doesn't matter if I'm like, I don't really like this. I can like appreciate. You can kind of understand, like sometimes I feel like you can feel the vibe of something and appreciate like where it came from, even if you're not resonating on a personal level. Yeah,
totally. And I think a good example of that, and I tried again, like I love Metallica, again, one of my favourite bands. I've never been able to get into Lulu with Lou Reed, like no matter how hard I try. And once every couple of years, I think, I'm going to try this again, see if I can get a little bit further, see if I can get a bit further. But at the same time, I can't not appreciate, again, the work and the effort and the talent that went into that album. It's just not for me. I just can't do it.
You got to give them credit, man. Like I think Metallica is so fascinating because they always have taken those chances, and that's one thing maybe why they're so huge. I mean, from the get-go, they've always just written insanely great songs, amazing songs, great live performers, workhorses, great business sense, from Lars probably particularly, but all that stuff made it what it is, great management, but yada, yada, yada. But always taking those chances, evolving, a lot of things that make you just go like, like Load came out. Everyone's like, they cut their hair and they suck, sellouts, It's a great album. Load's a great album. It's sonically fantastic. There's a lot of good music on it. I think Load is fantastic. This whole like notion they sold out with the Black Album is absurd to me. I think the Black Album is a masterpiece. I think everything they did up to Reload's not my favorite. It's hit and miss to me. I find Saint Anger, I've tried Saint Anger and Lulu, I find unlistenable. But hey, they tried it. They tried something different. Props to them for doing it, I mean, does AC/DC ever do that? No, but I still love AC/DC too. Like, you know what you're going to get. It's always good. It's just different bands. I don't have a problem either way, right? Like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it, right? But Metallica, they're always just trying different things, and sometimes they fall flat. But hey, I know a guy that loves Saint Anger and he hates Metallica, which is just weird.
Yeah, that is bizarre.
But hey, whatever, different strokes,
I mean, talking again about, obviously we're going more to documentary now. We're talking more about kind of rock movies and stuff. Some Kind of Monster. And again, I don't know if it's my mental health background as well, with them being in the therapy sessions and stuff. I find that a fascinating movie, just kind of watching this band sort of implode and then come back together and the album that came out of it. So I think it's a very,
and to their credit, to their credit, putting that out there too, even just the exposing yourself. And maybe some of it is for show, but there's no doubt. I mean, there's no doubt. Can you imagine the stress? And I mean, that those guys, of course you could have a freaking nervous breakdown. And as a musician myself, like I'm a huge proponent for what's called the Sims Foundation here in Austin. And so many people, I've been surprised to meet so many people and have very open conversations about depression and this and that. And you're like, wow, really? You? Because you look like you're doing really well. But like so many people struggle with the same thing. And I don't even think that it doesn't seem like it's contingent on where you are on the totem pole, monetarily or success wise. Yeah. The human struggle, And so I think there's something cool about that. And yeah, Metallica's always kind of been at the forefront. One thing I hated about that movie was Dave Mustaine crying. I was like, no, stop it, Dave. I was like, Megadeth fucking rules, dude. Like, the best thing that ever happened. I mean, yeah, I get, like, from his standpoint, I'm like, thank God you got kicked out of Metallica. Megadeth is awesome. Like, I love Megadeth. We wouldn't have any of that. Like, it probably could have never worked, man. There's just too many strong egos in one place,
Absolutely. I think when you talk about the mental health side of things, I mean, to be fair, I could come and talk about mental health for as long as you wanted me to. For my own, obviously, my own struggles with it, as well as kind of working in mental health now. Music, without sounding, and this is probably at the risk of sounding a bit kind of melodramatic and stuff, music's literally saved my life on more than one occasion. Do you know what I mean?
I think that goes for probably most of us, dude.
Yeah.
I mean, we all have soundtracks of our life that get us through those times, man. And it's like, I think you can identify there are certain memories and maybe even, locations and smells, who knows, that take you back to an album and put you in a place. Like, that's pretty amazing. And I think that, I don't know, man, I would venture to say that's pretty, what do you think, Vic? Like pretty,
no, I think it's
common.
Yeah, it's pretty common. It's pretty accurate. I mean, there's a lot of things that I can think back to.
I think if we think of so for me, a very recent album, I think it was only a couple of years old now, Korn's album, The Nothing, which obviously Jonathan Davis wrote after his wife had died. And I mean, that's a guy Korn were always if I'm down, I'm listening to Korn. That they put
he's always put everything on the table. Like the darkest shit is just like, there you go.
And I'm not going to pretend I've had anything like that life experience happened, but there's something quite cathartic about being able to kind of listen to that and feel that someone understands. But that album particularly, and again, so I was doing my training for my current post at the time, so I wasn't struggling with my mental health at the time that album came out. And I mean, I've loved Korn for years. I think they've had some amazing albums. That, for me, controversial opinion, is probably their best album. I absolutely love The Nothing. I think it's an amazing album.
Do you know much about the band Typo Negative? Have you listened to them much?
I've listened to it a little bit. I wouldn't say a lot.
Yeah. Typo's kind of that for me. And Typo's interesting because I think Typo, there is a genuine place of depression and mental illness and all that comes from the lyrical content and the guy, who is now deceased songwriter and all that kind of stuff. And I think, but they did something so amazing with it. They put a sort of, you can kind of listen to it either way. Like there's a satirical spin on a lot of things. It's humorous and hilarious, but there's also like a really, for lack of a better word, they got that goth label that's kind of that subtext that is dark. That band in particular, for me, I could always listen to and be like almost like empowered by listening to that and listen I identify with this depression and this misery and all those kind of things, but it's also making me laugh and it's making me fucking pumped and the music is cool. And another thing I love about that band is I think they did a great job of just combined, they used to cover all these classic rock songs and you can hear the Beatles influence. You got to kind of listen for it. I mean, there's the obvious Sabbath, but every time I ever saw them live, they would cover CCR or Beatles or Doors or all these, they always had a couple, like Neil Young, Cinnamon Girl, Seals and Crofts, Summer Breeze, and they would always do it their own way. But they got this goth moniker and they had this slow, this vampire rock, but it was mixed with punk rock and metal and satire, and I just love that. Such a unique brand of that, and for me, probably like you're talking about with Korn, it was just something that whether I was depressed or not, I could tap into that part of me, and it's almost empowering in a way, right? It makes you feel better,
It does. No, it really does, and I think that's the thing that I know, there'd be certain people in my life that would be thinking, why are you listening to that album? So it's like, are you trying to make yourself feel worse kind of thing? But it's like, well,
it's the opposite.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, absolute opposite.
Yeah. And we're all different, and it's funny because some people they listen to good old going down to the river and drinking beers in my buddy's country, and that makes them feel good. To me, I'm like, I'm fucking pissed now. Like, I don't like that. I don't identify with it. I hated high school. It's like I want Type O Negative makes me feel good. You know what I mean? Like, so it's just it's everyone's different.
Oh, totally.
Anyway, back to Queen. Where were we? We skipped over In the Lap of the Gods, which is a sort of bookmark of side 1, side 2. Is that correct?
It is, yeah.
That
opens side
actually,
2, yeah.
It's so In the Lap of the Gods is the first and last track on side 2. Right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Okay. So what's up with this?
So, what I'd say to anyone who is maybe doing a deep dive is like just the first time I listened to this album, so it was on CD. So at the time. Like Roger Taylor lets out this like really like high screaming falsetto.
Yes.
And like, I think we even said on the episode where we covered it, I'm like, brace yourself for it, because if you don't know what's coming, like, don't listen to the album on shuffle. Don't put it in a playlist on shuffle, because it does it. Like, I mean, the notes are crazy. Like, even those high notes on Bohemian Rhapsody, you presume they're Freddie, they're Roger. And when you hear the gravelly voice of Roger, that range is amazing. So that at the very start is Roger Taylor, which blows my mind.
I hope I don't have the wrong song here, because it made me think of Pink Floyd for a couple of reasons here. One, I think a lot of those times with like Floyd too, you'll hear some of the higher vocals, which is actually Richard Wright, not Gilmour sometimes, right? But also it made me think the first time I was listening to this, I don't know if it's this note you're talking about, but maybe it is, because it almost made me think of Great Gig in the Sky, Claire Torrey's soaring vocals. It almost it's way up there. It almost sounds female, right? Kind of. Yeah. Is that probably the same vocal we're talking about?
Yeah, I think so. And I think because again, it comes in towards the end. So I think they've put some kind of effect on Freddie's voice as well, where it sounds a bit slowed down or a bit deeper. And then Roger comes back in as they're kind of coming out of the song. And again, I think they may be the bits. I'd never made that comparison before, but I think you're really right. I think it does remind me of Great Gig in the Sky.
Yeah, it's pretty cool, man. And I never would have, if I hadn't gone through and like listened to this and read about it a little bit, I would have never thought that. I just sort of thought, oh, classic Mercury way up there in the stratosphere. But no, it's totally not, That's the thing that's so cool about a lot of these bands too, is like you have these multiple singers. Seems like maybe back then more than now. I mean, you got great, I think of bands like Alice in Chains, who are great, known for the harmonies and the dual singers, but a lot of bands, they have a front man, and then they layer they'll have the background vocals, but no one's going like, oh, Duff McKagan's a great singer. No defense to Duff. I love Duff and I love Guns N' Roses, but it's not like, Jerry Cantrell, Lane Staley, or David Gilmour. Well, Waters has a weird ass voice, but it's pretty iconic. Or Lennon McCartney, right? I mean, it's like, you don't think of it in that same context, and so you kind of have this Ozzy or Axl or Mike Patton or whatever, right? And the other guys are supporting, but you don't think of them vocally. Whereas a lot of these older bands, it seems like they had these. Everyone was just this like freaking. I mean, Queen must be the pinnacle of that, because like you're just listening to this insane harmony stuff all the time.
I think that's why I'm
with
such a
Van Halen.
Yeah, I think I'm such a sucker for a harmony. I think that comes from my love of Queen. Like even kind of that Rumours era Fleetwood Mac, where you've got kind of Lindsey Buckingham, Stevie Nicks, Christine McVie, kind of their voices just seem to work together like in this just most amazing way, which is. Without going too much into kind of the trials and tribulations of Fleetwood Mac, like I think it's such a shame that Lindsay's not in that band anymore. Like because, again, it's. I think you need all of them. It's they're all a vital piece of that puzzle, at least for that era of Fleetwood Mac. Obviously I know there was much more going on before that.
That's the thing about those multi-singer bands. It's kind of weird. I mean, even when you have like AC/DC and Bon Scott, I mean, they're so iconic. But Brian, for God's sake,
Brian Johnston.
It's not the freaking Beach Boys. Brian Johnston came in. By the way, speaking of the Beach Boys, I heard one of the funniest damn things the other day. I just cracked me up, and I love it. The band, the Melvins. You know much about those guys? So I mean, the Melvins put out an album like every 15 minutes. They're just insanely prolific. They're always touring. I love the Melvins. They're awesome. I love them. And I didn't even know they had something new out because there's always something new out. And the first track, I don't think it's a cover record, but the first track is called I Fuck Around. And I was like, okay, click play. And it's a cover of the old I Run Around, I think, by the Beach Boys. But instead of I run around, round, or I get around, I get around. All it is, fuck around, I fuck around, I fuck around. And they've got all the fucking Beach Boys. It's absolutely hilarious, dude. I cannot get enough of it. It's just amazing.
As soon as we're finished, that's what I'm listening to. I'm going to go and find it.
Oh, dude, I Fuck Around by the Melvins. Like, Grammy, please, it's the best. Anyway.
Hey, talking about Brian Johnston, I mean, obviously he's from Newcastle, which is just up the road from Durham. Yeah. And it's so funny because obviously people who haven't heard him talk, I always think that's a really funny thing because obviously you hear that AC/DC screechy vocal and he's like, I'm Brian Johnson, like proper joke. Like, and I played it to my older sister, because my nephew's really getting into AC/DC. And I was like, oh, do you want to hear what... I was like, listen to this. He'll not... Because he's from Newcastle. So like, easy. Played him, I think it's because he did this Mint TV series where he goes to visit all these rock stars. So he interviewed Sting and Mick Fleetwood and Dave Grohl and all these people and just talks about their career. So I played her a clip of that. Nice. She couldn't believe that this the quintessential Geordie bloke. It's like the vocalist of AC/DC. You know, it's crazy, but I think that's, and it's controversial because I know a lot of people always, you know, Bon Scott is Bon Scott, but I think, I don't know, maybe it's a bit of kind of regional pride. I always love the Brian Johnson stuff personally.
Yeah, I mean, he filled the shoes, man. Yeah. You know, I mean, I feel like we were just talking about this. Maybe it was Rob, Vic, I don't remember what episode it was, but we're kind of like the Highway to Hell versus Back in Black. And I'm like, man, both. Yeah. Like, they're both just fantastic albums. Like, I can't pick one era or the other. Like, there's that, you know, the Van Hagar, right? The David Lee Roth versus... Like, people side with this and that. I'm like, man, I like For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge. I like 1984. I'm not, admittedly, the hugest Van Halen fan that knows their catalog, but I think there's really great stuff from both. And same with AC/DC. I feel like AC/DC just can never do wrong. They may not be reinventing the wheel. You know what you're going to get, but it's always good, man.
I mean, that last album that they've just done, Power Up.
It's good. Amazing. Yeah.
Really good.
It's really good. Stone Cold Crazy, like, you would think, like, we could just... First of all, one thing I noticed about this track, it's really short. I don't think Metallica's version was that short. They must have added some stuff, unless I'm wrong.
I don't know if maybe the solo was a bit longer, possibly. To be fair, I've never put them side by side, but... And like I said before, I saw them play that at Nebworth, which was just amazing, because obviously Nebworth for Queen fans is pretty hallowed ground, because that was Queen's last gig with Freddie, and it was the Sonosphere Festival, and I was actually working there I was working in the VIP campsite, and they basically said, like, if you get everyone ushered in, you know, show them to their tents in the VIP campsite, you can go and see whatever bands you want over the weekend, and Metallica were the last band on, so I was like, right, perfect. Went along to see Metallica. It was during the World Magnetic Tour, so it was probably about 10 years ago now, but it was... They did Stone Cold Crazy at the end, and it was amazing, absolutely amazing.
That song, what was Freddie Mercury's prior band?
So there was a few. So he was in a band called Wreckage.
That was it.
But then obviously Brian and Roger were in a band called Smile. I think that's one of the few songs until later on, like later in the 80s. I think that's one of the few songs in the 70s that's credited to all four of them.
I read because they. It sounded like it had its embryonic state in Mercury's band, maybe, but they apparently it's credited to all four because they couldn't remember who wrote the lyrics. That's what I read. I don't know if it's accurate or not. It's Wikipedia.
Yeah, I think, to be fair, I think like even those early Queen gigs, I think they were playing Stone Cold Crazy. I think it is like one of the
you're right.
One of the first. But then for whatever reason, it didn't make those initial two albums. And I think it would have fitted in really nicely on the first album, actually, thinking about it.
Well, back to the thrash metal thing, man. I mean, that's pretty freaking hard rock for, I mean, they're playing that in the early 70s, and that's pretty freaking heavy.
Totally. And I think that's what, once you dive for me, it's just like going down a rabbit hole, because the greatest hits are great, particularly, you know what I mean? Like we say, great rock band in the 70s, great pop band in the 80s, and but when you dig into all of those albums, there's just so much going on, and all these kind of things where you think, oh well, one of the first to do this, or were they trying to do this here, or what was going on? And, you know, even then you dive into the solo stuff, and then that's another rabbit hole altogether. Like, yeah, it's just, there's just so much to get stuck into.
Well, and it was a little later, and maybe a little more recording had come, you know, due to partly to the Beatles and George Martin and Les Paul and these guys, like, you know, recording had come a long way since the Beatles started making their records, I guess, in the early 60s. But like, yeah, because the Beatles, you know, everyone back then, even though it was way harder to do, everyone put out like 2 records a year back then. And now it takes, you know, guys like me like 4 years to put out 2 songs. But like, it was like the Beatles, I mean, it seems like they had 5, 6, whatever pop records, which did have like a nice variety of cool stuff. But it doesn't seem like they really started like evolving, right, until Rubber Soul Revolver, maybe, to be fair, maybe, right? Whereas Queen, like right off the bat, here we got this album that's just like frickin', you know, Abbey Road. It's frickin' got everything, you know?
And I think even like the Queen 2, which if you walk up the stairs in my house, we've got like a framed copy of Queen 2, because it's the Bohemian Rhapsody goes like at the very top of the stairs.
Right.
And like even that, so just read stuff like, so it's not side A and side B, it's the black side and the white side. You know what I mean? And I just the way that they kind of thought about the whole presentation of it all. And I've just ordered, because it's just been re-released, because I couldn't get my hands on it the last time. There's this like amazing box set of all their studio albums on vinyl, which has set me back quite a bit. Wow. But even that, like when it's come, like when it does come rather, Queen 2, they're split it over 2 records, so one of them is going to be white and one of them is going to be black. And I just think the way that they kind of that they thought about things at the time, and you just see that evolution. Like if you went through all the albums, like I think there is actually a podcast that does this, but you could do a podcast about that evolution of Queen going through the albums, because you can see this journey that they go on, and kind of not just the band, but kind of the members and kind of what's influencing them at the time. And, you know, if you listen to the solo stuff, you're like, oh, right, yep, that makes sense. So that's what's going on. Like it's very much something that that you can follow, I think. Absolutely.
Yeah, and back to like just the album and that, you know, the vinyl and having that, like little things like that. Like I thought that was so cool. Guns N' Roses, back to Appetite, the G side and the R side, you know, and, you know, the black side and the white side and just all those kind of little things. They're cool. You know, it's a complete body of art. It's an artistic endeavor from the music itself to the art and all of it. And there is a song. So then you have this interesting sort of little run of songs that are all very short.
Yeah.
And we were talked about Misfire a little bit, but like Dear Friends, Misfire, really short little songs.
Def Leppard covered Dear Friends, and they like made it longer, so they put a bit more into it, because that's just a really simple little. It's Freddie on the piano. I think it might even be Brian on the piano. Like just really simple harmonies. And I think it's just over a minute long. It's really, really short. And then obviously Misfire, which is John Deacon's first writing credit. And John, he doesn't actually sing any vocals on any Queen albums. He's the only one who doesn't. And I always like this. I always say whenever we talk about Queen or talk about John Deacon on the podcast, Freddie used to call him the ostrich, because he wouldn't do it much, but when he did, he would lay the golden egg. And as you get into the 80s, I think with those Queen albums, that John builds in confidence, and some of those biggest Queen hits are John Deacon songs. So you talk things like "You're My Best Friend," "I Want to Break Free," you know, these songs that are. He really, Another One Bites the Dust, you know, that's John. Yeah. You know, so for me, although I think if you did a straw poll and you said to someone, name all 4 members of Queen, like I think that he'd be the one that people would struggle with the most. It gets to a point where he's probably one of the most integral once you get into the 80s in terms of the band's sound. And I think this is that Misfire, because I think he plays all the instruments on this. And he writes it. This is his first, like, right, well, let's see how this goes. And then the next album is My Best Friend, which is just an amazing song. Huh. So I really like it, because it's the start of kind of John's kind of musical journey in a weird way.
Then you got Bring Back That Leroy Brown, like a tap kipper to Jim Croce, right?
Yeah, I love this song. So again, when I said vaudeville earlier on, like it's again just a crazy song, but it just works in the context of the album. I think it's definitely, you know, I mean, I do listen to Queen on shuffle. I don't put In the Lap of the Gods in there just in case, but like, you know, Bring Back That Leroy Brown, it just fits in at that point. You've had a couple of short songs. It's really upbeat. It's yeah, it's just crazy, absolutely crazy. But did they do it live? I think they may have done it live a little bit. But again, I think that's one of those kind of hidden gems that when you go in, like if you think, if your knowledge of Queen is like, Radio Gaga, Bohemian Rhapsody, Another One Bites the Dust, bring back that Leroy Brown is going to be a bit of a left turn, but like a really good one. So,
well, that's the thing about Queen though. Like I expect left turns. Like even Queen hits are left turns. You know. But I know what you mean. Like it's not one you would know. What I thought was interesting too, and it's obvious if you know Marx Brothers, but they had. Not this one, I guess Night of the Opera, and then what was the one after that? Because they were both Marx Brothers titles, right? Day at the Races. Yeah, I wonder, is there anything beyond that? Just would one of the members or all of them just huge Marx Brothers fans, or do you know anything about that?
So we did Night at the Opera last year. It was about this time last year. And there's an awesome singer. So again, someone else I would totally recommend checking out, an amazing singer called Savannah Pope. And we'd had her on previously. We talked about the Rocky Horror soundtrack, and she came back on to do a Night at the Opera. And she'd said that, and I'd never known this. This was one of those times where I was given a Queen fact that I didn't know, and that was really exciting, was that Queen had actually performed for Groucho Marx, like in his home. He'd given like a personal invite to his home, and they performed 39, which is on A Night at the Opera. There may have been some other songs as well. So for me, I thought it must have been appreciation of of those movies, but it sounds like that appreciation was mutual. So I think that's really cool. And I think
that is cool.
Again, the fact that those influences aren't just musical influences, that they're pulling from all sorts of different areas, and then that's reflected in the music.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the musicality of the Marx Brothers themselves, even right, and then but then also the kind of the quirkiness and the comedy. Now, one thing that hit me when I heard "She Makes Me," I think the Brian May tune has got acoustic guitar. This almost like felt to me like I got a little bit of vibe of something that didn't come till quite a bit later, like Crazy Little Thing Called Love. Almost felt a little. Not, you know what I mean? Like just something about the vibe in the acoustic guitar.
I love this. It's one of my favorites. But again, I'm as much as I love Freddie, I'm very much a sucker for those on the Queen albums where it's Roger O'Brien singing, because I just love that variety. I think
that's right. That's all Brian. Yeah, you're right. It's him on vocals too.
And I think it's an interesting one because, from what I gather, I don't think it's a hugely popular one with people. Like, I've never heard people really rave about how it's this amazing song. From day one, it really kind of struck me. It's just got this really kind of. It's just got this real vibe about it. I can't even describe the word that I'm thinking. And then there's some sounds at the end that he's called kind of New York nightmare sounds, just kind of going on.
Right. Yeah.
And I just think it's, because there are some albums where, Brian maybe does a couple of vocals, and it's just this track, obviously, with his health problems, I think, at the time. But it's a really, I just think, I think for me, it's a standout track. It's one of my favorites on the album. But I don't know if I'm kind of in the minority with that one.
Well, with you picking this album, which is, it's impossible, right? You're like, I picked Appetite because it was like what kind of started me on that path, I guess. That's why I picked it, but I could pick any number of albums. But one thing obviously in common with this or Appetite or whatever is like there are no bad tracks, right? I mean, you might have your favorites, they're the hits or whatever, but there's just like, listen to this album, there's like no moment when I was like, and there's a few Queen songs where I'm just like, I mean, when you write that many freaking songs, like not everything's going to be Bohemian Rhapsody, but like, man, it's like really solid start to finish. And then tell us about the reprise. So what is the deal with the bookmarks on the B side of this?
So it's a very different song, isn't it? So it's kind of in the lap of the gods revisited. And it's a bit more, I think this was one of the first ones that became a bit of an anthem for them live. So I've obviously seen perform, well, obviously not in the flesh, but seen performances of them do it in the lap of the gods revisited. Again, I think that those songs are part of that wry world that he's kind of built with his like imagination and his sister and all this kind of stuff. So I think there's quite a few tracks laid on those first three albums that are part of this sort of imaginary world that he created. And I'd actually found there was a guy on Facebook who's actually obviously a massive Queen fan, and he's written a book, all like a fantasy novel, all about this magical world that Freddie created and kind of based off all the songs and this, that, and the other, and he's trying to get it published at the moment. So that's something I'm keeping an eye on, because I'd love to read it just to kind of see, because again, obviously, so that all that creativity from Queen is obviously really, I think he's in New Zealand or Australia, and it's just created this real kind of obviously really inspired him to kind of write this story. But I think it's cool that there's so many. I'd have to have a bit of a look back through them all. I know there's like My Fairy King on the first album and March of the Black Queen on the second album, and there's quite a few of them that all fit into this kind of, like, obviously all Freddie songs, and they all fit into this narrative of like this magical world called Rye. And I think that's what In the Lap of the Gods is. I think that the bookend in the album, I think that they're maybe the last time, because I don't think A Night at the Opera's got anything like that. I think that's probably the last one.
Yeah, it was like kind of that segue point from that fantasy, which is like kind of a common theme with progressive, right? Like you think of Rush lyric, right? You think of that, a lot of that kind of fairy tale-esque sort of lyrical content. But then they kind of got away from that Queen, right? From here on out, it wasn't so much back to that.
I think even like, obviously people have debated for years what Bohemian Rhapsody's about, and in some ways I don't really want to know what it's about. I mean, me and Savannah had because she had a lot of thoughts on it. I think we was talking about half an hour about Bohemian Rhapsody when we covered A Night at the Opera. And then there's a song on there called The Prophet Song on A Night at the Opera, but that's a Brian May song, so that's not kind of fitted into that narrative. And then I think once you get to A Day at the Races, it starts to become a little more News of the World. Certainly it starts to get a bit more kind of straightforward, like kind of rock anthems kind of thing. And then obviously as we get into the 80s, jazz, actually, I was thinking about jazz. That's probably an album I don't listen to very much. Jazz is another album that's just all over the place. Ironically, I don't think there's any kind of jazz influence on that album at all.
I was wondering what's up with the title for that album.
I don't really know, to be fair.
Who knows?
But I think that's probably one of the ones I listen to the least. Not that I dislike it, but like I love those early albums. And then there's some of the ones in the 80s that have a lot of time. So I love Innuendo, which was Freddie's last one before he passed. I think that's an amazing album. I think The Works was a really good album. But again, they're probably the points where obviously there's still that rock influence in there, but it's a lot more chart friendly. It's a lot more poppy. It's more in line with that 80s sound.
Right. There was no getting away from that sound. Like when the 80s hit, and it had it in the 70s, but it was like kind of cool. And then I'm not saying the 80s wasn't, it was just different, but it's like you weren't going to get away from the synths and the
exactly.
It was just like it was going to happen. Hey, speaking of the 80s and that 80s sound, for like pop synth and all that kind of music, guys from your neck of the woods. Now I could be completely 1,000% wrong. Where's Sting from? Somewhere in that
Sting's
area?
Newcastle,
He's in Newcastle. What about Duran Duran?
I think Duran Duran are a bit further. I think they're a bit further south.
Okay.
I'm going to look that up because I'm not sure, actually. But I think in my head, they've always just been further south. I think it's more like say, Brian Johnson, Sting, Mark Knopfler. They're kind of the what?
Oh, Mark Knopfler. Okay. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right over there on the River Tyne, right?
Yeah.
Dude, I mean, this is amazing. Like, next time I come over there to see Guy, we should hang, man.
Definitely. Talking about Sting, actually. So during obviously the Durham Cathedral, I've been lucky enough to see Sting only once. And it happens to be he was performing inside Durham Cathedral, which was just an amazing memory. So my dad was in Durham Place at the time. They were doing this thing for the BBC where he was performing. He'd released an album about songs of winter or something like that. And he was performing, and the BBC were filming it. And my dad rang me up. I was at work, and he was like, "What are you doing tonight?" And I was like, "Oh, not much. Why?" And he was like, "Oh, well, do you want to come to the cathedral? Sting's doing a dress rehearsal." So we went in. Obviously, there were other people there, but we sat and watched. And what was great was he performed songs he's going to perform on the special. But there's a song from his album Brand New Day called Ghost Story, which I've always loved. And he was like, "I'm not be performing this one when I'm recording it, but I'm going to play it now." And so then I got to hear one of my favourite Sting songs inside Durham Cathedral, which is just a memory I'll never forget. You can buy it on DVD, the performance. But it was, crazy.
Brand New Day. What year was that album?
I'd say 99.
That wasn't the one with If I Ever Lose My Faith, was it? That was earlier? I feel like
that was 10 Summoners Tales, possibly. Brand New Day had Desert Rose.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
That's where he started. Shortly after that, he went off in a bit of a indulgent direction for a little while, and then he's recently kind of jumped back into.
What have you done a Police album? Has anyone done a Police album?
We did Synchronicity.
Okay.
Yeah, so it was David Johnston's been on twice, so he did Highway to Hell, but the first time he did Synchronicity.
Okay, nice.
Good pick. Great album.
just messing around with a little police. I was doing like a band rehearsal with some of the guys from Good Roger yesterday, and we ended up kind of just playing a little, talking about the police a little bit, doing that, and then we ended up doing a little bit of. I had never played this. I love this song, the one I just mentioned, which now I can't think of the damn title.
That's that.
If I ever lose my faith, really great chord progressions, really interesting stuff.
Did Disturbed cover that recently?
Did they?
I feel like they did.
I have no idea.
They did Sound of Silence.
Wow, that's cool.
And then I feel like they did that.
Oh, wow.
But I might have made that up. Let's have a look. I'm sure they did, though. I'm sure they did.
Have you had a Maiden album?
Yes, so we did Power Slave. That was quite recent.
I saw that on the list.
I'm gonna let you and Vic go. I'm gonna turn it over to Vic and let you guys go Maiden here for a minute. let's talk Power Slave. Let's hear it.
All right, man. That actually, Rhyme of the Ancient Mariner was the first song I heard off of that album. So that was 85, I think.
84, 85, yeah. I think you might be on. I think you're on the money there. I think it's 85. Yeah. I think it's so for me. I mean, I think to be fair, like with Maiden, 80s Maiden albums, I don't think you can go wrong. To be honest, I think they're all amazing. And I genuinely thought that someone would pick Number of the Beast first, or maybe Seventh Son of a Seventh Son. So I was really pleasantly surprised when it was Power Slave. I was like, I'm pleased with that.
I would probably go with Killers. Because it wasn't the first one I heard, but after I heard it, I was like, wow, I really like this one.
Is that their second album? That's
one.
Early.
Yeah, they still had, they didn't have Bruce Dickinson yet. They had, oh gosh. I was going to say Blaze Bailey, but it's not Blaze Bailey.
Yeah, Paul Diano, I think.
Paul Diano, yes. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, to be fair, like I love those first two albums, but like I love Bruce Dickinson, so he can do no wrong in my eyes. But I mean, even that album Senjutsu this year, like I know some people don't like the kind of the proggy direction they've gone in. I really like it.
I dig it.
And that album, like I ordered it on vinyl. I was at work through the day. It turned up. My wife was on night shift, so that was one of those lights off, headphones. Let's just enjoy this as it should be.
After you sang Beth.
After I sang Beth by Case, and then I came downstairs. But yeah, no, it's just, and I think that's what it is. I think it's that these bands, like AC/DC and Maiden, are still making these like phenomenal albums, and there's always gonna be some people who don't like them, but like I don't think you can. Yeah, I don't think you can knock them. I think Senjutsu is an amazing album.
I lost track for a bit after the X Factor, and it wasn't until I think The Final Frontier.
Yeah,
I went and saw them. I actually saw them here in Texas, and then I went to Seattle to watch a show with my cousin, and then I started backtracking, right, going back through the catalog backwards, and so picking up all, where Adrian and Bruce Dickinson come back into the band. I can't remember what album that one is, but the Book of Souls came out. I love that album. And this new one.
Yeah, I think I'm the same as you. I kind of went back. So I had like the Best of the Beast album was my introduction to Iron Maiden. I remember just obviously seeing that in the shop and thinking, I need to listen to this album. Yeah. So obviously I was very familiar with that era, and then funnily enough, I think it was the Final Frontier tour that I saw them on, and then kind of went back to kind of listen to these ones that I'd missed, like Brave New World and all this kind of stuff.
Brave New World.
But no, I just think that they're. I just think they're phenomenal. I'm really hoping there's a UK tour next year. That's what I'm hoping. But I think it might be the year after, because they do some massive tours over in the States. Like they'll be there for months on end. So.
Well, I know Bruce is doing the spoken word tour, where I guess he's talking about the album now. He's talking about the book that I'm going through right now, and so I think he's doing a show in Austin in February. I bought a couple of tickets already, so.
Oh, nice.
I'm going to go check that out.
I was hoping to go, but he didn't get... it's funny because I guess, obviously, with the US being so big, like, you guys will be much more inclined to travel for hours on end. But, like, so for example, Manchester is probably like a 2.5, 3 hour drive. Like, here in the UK, you'd be like, no, I'll catch you when you come to Newcastle.
That's half the country.
I'll catch you when you come to Newcastle. So it's... I mean, when I was younger, I used to do that sort of thing. But it's so funny, isn't it? Because then people will be like... they'll announce a UK tour and they'll do Birmingham, London, and Glasgow. And you'd be like, hang on.
Yeah.
I think it's the same though here. Like, well, Texas is so huge and spread out, and like where we're at in Austin, it's like very central. But if someone plays San Antonio, it's like cool, let's go. It's a hop and a skip down an interstate, you know, an hour drive. If they're playing Dallas, it's like, nah, that's 3.5 hours.
Maiden did a show here, and it was their only Texas show, and it was a few years back, and I think they were doing the second half of those 80s albums, right? So they had the Somewhere in Time, they had the Seventh Son of the Seventh Sunset. I remember that.
Are you talking about the one in San Antonio?
No, the one that was here in Coda.
Right, that Megadeth opened.
Yes,
right?
Megadeth opened. Yeah.
Okay.
That's a lineup, isn't it?
Yeah, and so it was the only.
Megadeth totally got the opening band treatment on
Totally
that. Though,
did.
right? It was like 5 songs, and I'm like, bye. I was like, what? But dude, Maiden fucking crushed it. It was so good.
And there were people from all over. It was the only Texas show, so I think there was people from like Louisiana and just North Texas and everywhere else. I do remember that show. It was pretty big.
Yeah.
It's the only time I've seen Maiden, but I'm not nearly the Maiden fan you guys are. Shamefully, there's so many albums. We do these kind of things and we talk about it. I'm like, God, I should just I need to just like go listen to, like, need to just like take, like, they should just have a calendar of like 1 week a year. I'm going to like go through each band.
I do this though. I have like, and I don't know if it's because of the podcast or whether it predates that, I'm not sure, but like, I'll have a certain band where I'll think, right, this year I'm going to listen to this band more. So like Pink Floyd have been that band at one time, Fleetwood Mac have. Last year it was Rush. Like, where I think like, right, well, I like the hits, I like this, I like that, but I'm going to really dive into these, and I'm really going to kind of dig in, and that's when I usually then start geeking out on like documentaries and biographies and all of that kind of stuff. So it's always nice to be doing that. But I think that's just me. I think if I'm not diving headfirst into something, then I'm bored. So
they had a few more questions. I'll let you go here pretty soon. We hitting the 2 hour
no worries.
as I suspected we would. I'm really glad that we like started earlier than whatever our time zone miscommunication was. But like, so you've been to it sounds like a ton of concerts and amazing things. Are there any specific ones that are like your absolute favorites?
So Metallica at Nebworth is definitely one that I always kind of think about. Again, when we're talking about Blackstone Cherry, shortly after me and my wife got married, we drove. There was one of the times that we did kind of drive for a few hours, but we drove to Glasgow because the band were playing like a warm-up gig before a big festival. So there was literally, I think it was like 300 capacity or something. Like I say,
they were like, "Oh shit, it's like the US all over again."
That was amazing. To be fair, even that Roger Taylor one that I was just talking about, actually. I mean, like I say, I've been looking. I saw Queen with Paul Rodgers twice. That was great. I saw them with Adam Lambert. That was great. But to see Roger Taylor like doing that solo stuff and those kind of deep cuts, and he did Radio Gaga and all that kind of stuff as well. But and I was right at the front for that as well. So it was. So that was pretty special. Aerosmith. I saw Aerosmith at Hyde Park, and they were phenomenal.
What tour was that?
It was 2007. So I don't know what album they'll have been promoting at the time. They might have just come over for the festival dates. There was a festival called like the Hard Rock Collin. I think Peter Gabriel played the first night, and Aerosmith played the second night. And Aerosmith, they were just phenomenal. I do think so. Obviously, Donington. Donington's kind of like hallowed ground here in the UK for like.
Oh yeah,
fans.
man.
And obviously, they do Download every year. I think a standout from that. Shortly after his first solo album came out, Slash played it. So and I don't think Miles Kennedy was like official yet, but he was with
Oh
it.
yeah.
And I loved that first album where he just had like all the guest vocalists on and stuff. And he got Lemmy on, and they did their track from the album. And I'm a huge Motorhead fan, so that was amazing. And then he did Sweet Child of Mine, which I think I'd said to you at the time during the podcast is my favourite song of all time, like undisputed. So to hear that riff,
we might have talked about that.
To hear that riff and to see that it's Slash that's playing it, that was definitely a goosebump moment for me. Spoiled shortly after because I think my friend who'd come had brought his girlfriend, and they had like a massive row afterwards. so I was just like, I'll just leave you guys be. I'm just gonna go over here. I think it's just. I'll think of loads after we've come off. I think it's. I just love live music so much. Like last year was probably the first year since like 2002 that I hadn't been to a gig, and it was just it was hard going, like it really was. But yeah,
Speaking of mental health, man, I mean, it's that kind of stuff is a important release for people to get out and just have that moment. I mean, I don't want to say it impacts me less. I just think it's different these days. I'm critically listening. But I mean, we all remember being a teen, or when you go to your first concert. My first concert was Guns N' Roses, Metallica, and Faith No More. To this day, 3 of my all-time favorite bands. I mean, God, unbelievable. I mean, just the impact and how amazing that was, and so many concerts since, and just getting something different from each. But yeah, I mean, it's not to say that you can't get cool things from watching videos and live streams or whatever, but man, being there in the moment and experiencing that is just second to none.
Yeah, I think Guns N' Roses were probably my first as well. So I got my exams. So I was 16. I got my exam results that day. My mum had bought me a ticket for Leeds Festival. Guns N' Roses were playing on the Friday, so then me and my friends kind of drove down to Leeds, which is about an hour and a half from Durham. It's not too far. And Guns N' Roses, but it was like Axl and Friends.
Yeah, it was when Bumblefoot was playing with him, right?
I don't think he joined yet, but
or was it Buckethead?
So I've seen them.
Okay. Yeah, same.
But,
okay.
Buckethead was he was awesome.
Right. Buckethead's great, man.
That was one of my kind of big memories of that night, was obviously when he was like doing his solo and juggling nunchucks and all this, this crazy stuff.
So good. I remember when I saw him like solo and I was like, wait, where's the band? I didn't realize it was just him and backing. And I was kind of like, oh man, okay, well, I thought it was going to be but it didn't matter, man. He was so entertaining. He's so good. And then that whole thing, he does the robot and nunchucks, and it's just like, dude, this is amazing. Yeah, Buckethead's really unique and awesome.
It's been postponed twice because of COVID, but we're hoping to go and see Guns N' Roses in Glasgow, funnily enough, next year. So it'd be nice to see them with Slash and Duff, because I saw them with Buckethead, and then obviously Bumblefoot was there in 2006 when I saw them last. And they didn't have a great reception. I think that's Axl was kind of at the height of his sort of diva stage, and he'd stormed off a couple of times, and people were chanting for Metallica who'd been on the night before, and
so it takes you back to the 90s.
And I mean, to be fair, towards the end it got really good, because I'm sure Izzy Stradlin came on, and Sebastian Bach, and all of these
no way, dude. Izzy Stradlin, I didn't think that guy had done anything that had surprised me. That's amazing.
So it was just
holy shit,
it was just awesome. But it was just the start. Wow. He's at one point because he'd slipped and he'd fallen, and I think he was just a bit embarrassed, and he walked off, so people had started booing, and he came over the PA just I'm trying to have a nice time. We'll try this again. He came back on.
Oh man, him and Dave Mustaine, they are some crazy.
That's what I was thinking.
But then I feel so the 2002 one was relatively uneventful. So it kind of felt nice to go to a Guns N' Roses show and have that experience, because that almost feels part of what you expect,
dude. And I've seen them both ways, and I love it. Yeah. I mean, obviously, when you see the iconic Guns N' Roses Slash and Duff and all that, it's pretty incredible. But everything I've been hearing from people that have seen it in the last few years, oh my god, and it's just doing stuff like playing Coma. You're like, that sounds so cool, man. So I have not seen them either in recent years, but that would be pretty amazing.
Yeah. But we'll see. Like I say, hopefully next July. So if it doesn't get postponed again, fingers crossed.
Yeah, man, totally. Hey, I've been saying this for years, but I hope I can get back over to England maybe next year. We'll see what happens. Every year we're trying to plan something. But I mean, obviously, what's happened in recent years threw a wrench in the world. Mm-hmm. So maybe. Hopefully we'll be back to some sort of normality, and bands will be touring more, and we can cross borders and stuff.
It's definitely picking up more here in the UK. Blackstone Cherry have recently been over, which is great. Obviously, so that they've been able to do it, and obviously British bands are touring a lot more, so it's starting to pick up again. So.
Did you see them recently when they were over there?
Yeah, was it September? I want to say September they were just over.
Who was playing with them? Or was it just them? Did they have another actor with them or no?
Who was it now?
Because it wasn't Jared James Nichols, was it? Because I think he was touring with him here.
It was a guy called Chris Barris. So he's a singer-songwriter, but he's pretty awesome too. He's really good.
Okay. Well, cool, dude. I mean, we could just yap all night long, but
no, thanks.
Boy, your daughter would be pissed if you hadn't. I'm assuming you already sang that,
that's all
right?
done. That's all done.
Okay, good.
I might just sing it to myself.
Whole podcast.
Daddy! He's going to go throw on
I need my kiss!
was it the Phantom of the Park?
Yeah.
Exactly. That's right. Just here, honey, watch this. I got to go do a quick podcast.
Yeah, but no, thanks for having us. It's been awesome. It's been absolutely awesome.
Oh, man. Yeah, dude, pleasure, Mike. It was really cool to have you on here. I absolutely love what you do. Your podcast is super cool. Great idea. And congrats with the success, man, and the guests you've been getting. I mean, fantastic. Yeah. Really cool.
Like I say, taking a bit of a break now. Like I say, I've started a new role at work, which is obviously taking a lot of my time, and we're planning to move house. So then there's going to be a whole new studio kitted out there, ready for the next season of my classic album. So hopefully,
but that's good though. Yeah,
all good stuff. So hopefully in the new year we'll get cracking with some new episodes.
And as the crowned victor of best album of the first couple of seasons, I get to come back.
Absolutely. To be fair, Abbey Road or Pink Floyd would be awesome choices. So
now, has that been picked yet? Has Abbey Road been picked? Wow! If Abbey Road has not been picked by the time I come back, that's going to have to be probably it.
Cool.
So. Cool, man. Well, all right, brother. Have a wonderful night. Thanks again for coming on. Mike Norris, My Classic Podcast, everybody. My Classic Album. Damn it. We're not talking about fucking podcast. We're talking about albums, for crying out loud. My Classic Album. This dude is cool. He knows his shit. If you're, listen to it. Go listen to it, music fans. Damn it. He's way more organized than I am. All right. Anywho, anything else? We good to go? What do you think? Got any words of wisdom for the kids out there, Vic?
Go listen to some good music.
Yeah,
hey, that's it.
Go.
I think that's it. It doesn't have to be complicated. Go listen to good music.
That's it.
All right. Until next time, this has been. I almost said My Classic Album. This has been Eclectic Soundtrax with Mike Norris from My Classic Album. Victor Ramos, Skunk Manhattan, Mike Norris, later.
Hey folks, that concludes another episode of the podcast. Guest links will be available in the show notes. We'd like to thank our friends at Top Shelf Music for showcasing the podcast on their site. Be sure and check them out at topshelfmusicmag.com for the latest music news, reviews, and events. We'd also like to thank the folks over at Tragan Guitars, Godin Guitars, Ernie Ball Strings, and 5 Iron Woodworks. Have a great week and catch you on the next one.